23 years old, and my father just shattered my index finger with his work hammer because I dared ask why my younger sister Emma got ribeye while I ate leftover meatloaf. The bone cracked like kindling. Blood pooled on our kitchen table. Dad wiped the hammer clean, while Mom sneered that broken fingers teach lessons about knowing your place. Emma cut into her perfectly grilled steak juice, running pink across her plate. I cradled my mangled hand and understood exactly what lesson they wanted me to learn. The pain in my finger pulsed with each heartbeat, but it was nothing compared to the familiar ache of being the family's designated failure. I pressed a dish towel against the wound, watching crimson seep through the checkered fabric while Emma continued eating her dinner as if nothing had happened. That was our family's dance, perfected over 23 years of practice. Emma had arrived when I was 4, and from her first breath, she became the sun our parents orbited around. Where I had been a difficult baby who cried too much and slept too little, Emma emerged peaceful and content. Mom loved telling anyone who would listen how Emma's first word was mama, while mine had been no. These stories, repeated endlessly at family gatherings, painted the narrative of who we were supposed to be. By the time Emma started kindergarten, the differences in our treatment had solidified into family law. She attended Preston Academy, the private school with the manicured lawns and Olympic-sized swimming pool, while I took the bus to Jefferson Elementary, where half the textbooks had missing pages and the playground equipment was held together with rust and hope. When I asked why Emma got to go to the fancy school, Dad backhanded me so hard I tasted copper for 3 days. "Smart investments go to smart kids," he had said, examining his knuckles for damage. "You're lucky we feed you at all." The financial disparities only grew wider as we aged. Emma's bedroom looked like a furniture catalog, complete with a canopy bed, matching white dresser, and a desk where she did homework under a designer lamp. My room held a mattress on the floor and a cardboard box for my clothes. When relatives visited, Mom would lock my door and claim it was being renovated. I learned to find refuge in the public library where Mrs. Henderson, the head librarian, would save books she thought I'd enjoy. She never asked about the bruises or why I sometimes fell asleep in the study carols. Through those books, I discovered that families weren't supposed to work like mine did. Other parents didn't keep spreadsheets comparing their children's worth or calculate the return on investment for birthday presents. The summer I turned 16, I overheard Mom and Dad discussing college funds. They had saved $40,000 for Emma's education, meticulously planning for her to attend whatever university she chose. When Mom mentioned my name, Dad laughed so hard he choked on his beer. "College for Opal. She'll be lucky if she graduates high school without getting knocked up. Waste of money." That conversation lit a fire in me that no amount of their cruelty could extinguish. I started working at the grocery store bagging groceries until my feet went numb. When that wasn't enough, I added shifts at the diner serving coffee to truckers at 3 in the morning. Every dollar went into a savings account they didn't know existed. My guidance counselor, Ms. Patricia Williams, became my secret ally. She helped me apply for community college and showed me how to file for financial aid without my parents' information. When I graduated high school with a 3.8 GPA, my parents didn't attend the ceremony. They were at Emma's dance recital instead. Community college opened doors I hadn't dared imagine. My anatomy professor, Dr. Marcus Chen, recognized my dedication and recommended me for the nursing program. The human body fascinated me, perhaps, because I had intimate knowledge of how it could break and heal. Every bone I studied reminded me of my own fractures, hairline cracks in my childhood that never quite mended properly. I moved out on my 19th birthday, renting a studio apartment above a laundromat. The walls vibrated during spin cycles, and the hot water only worked half the time, but it was mine. My parents didn't notice I was gone for 2 weeks. When they finally called, it was to demand I come back and clean Emma's bathroom. "She has a test tomorrow," Mom explained as if this was reasonable. "She can't study in a dirty environment." I hung up without responding and didn't answer their calls for a month. When I finally returned for Thanksgiving, the dynamic had shifted. Without me as their punching bag, they seemed smaller, like bullies without a victim. Emma had grown taller, her face showing the kind of beauty that comes from never knowing hunger or fear. The dinner that night followed the usual pattern. Emma received the turkey breast white meat glistening with butter and herbs. I got the neck and wings, the parts usually reserved for making stock. When I reached for the mashed potatoes, Mom slapped my hand away. "Those are for people who contribute to this family," she said, spooning an extra serving onto Emma's plate. I ate my scraps in silence, counting down the minutes until I could leave. But something had changed in my absence. Emma kept glancing at me, her fork pausing midway to her mouth. When our parents weren't looking, she slid her roll onto my plate. It was the first time she had ever shared her food with me. Working 3 jobs while attending nursing school meant I survived on 4 hours of sleep and gas station coffee. My classmates went to study groups and formed friendships over shared stress. I memorized medical terminology during bathroom breaks at the diner and practiced injection techniques on expired fruit from the grocery store's dumpster. The few times I visited home, the contrast between my life and Emma's became more stark. She had joined the college prep track at Preston, her schedule filled with AP classes and extracurriculars designed to impress admissions committees. Her wall displayed certificates and trophies, while mine remained bare, holding only the ghosts of dreams deferred. What I didn't know then was that Emma had started carrying a small digital recorder in her pocket. She captured Dad's rants about my worthlessness and Mom's creative cruelties. She documented the Christmas when they gave her a laptop while handing me a coupon for a free oil change. She recorded the birthday dinner where they sang to her over a 3-layer cake while pretending they had forgotten my birthday entirely, even though we were supposedly celebrating both. The night of the hammer incident, I had made the mistake of thinking distance had earned me the right to questions. 6 months had passed since my last visit, and I foolishly believed time might have softened their edges. Emma had called saying she missed me, and despite every instinct screaming otherwise, I drove home for dinner. The smell hit me first when I walked through the door. Ribeye steak seared in butter and rosemary, the kind of meal that appeared on special occasions. Emma sat at her usual place, hair pulled back in a French braid Mom had probably spent an hour perfecting. My seat held a paper plate with leftover meatloaf, the edges dried and cracking. "Nice of you to finally visit," Dad said, not looking up from his newspaper, though I don't know why we bother setting a place for ungrateful children. I sat down and stared at the meatloaf, probably 3 days old based on the way the ketchup glaze had darkened to rust. Across from me, Emma's steak bled perfectly pink juices onto bone china. The unfairness of it all accumulated over 23 years finally broke through my careful control. Why does Emma get steak while I get scraps? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Dad's newspaper lowered slowly, his eyes narrowing to slits I recognized from countless confrontations. Mom stopped cutting Emma's steak into bite-sized pieces, her knife suspended in midair. "What did you say?" Dad's voice carried the low rumble that preceded violence. I should have backed down. Should have apologized and eaten my scraps in silence, like I had been trained to do. But something about Emma's recorder hidden in her pocket and capturing this moment gave me courage I didn't possess. I asked why Emma gets steak while I get leftovers. We're both your daughters. The hammer appeared so quickly I didn't have time to flinch. He must have had it tucked beside his chair, waiting for an excuse to use it. Construction foreman habits die hard, and Frank Morrison never went anywhere without his tools. The blow came down with practiced precision, 20 years of swinging hammers into lumber and concrete. My left hand was flat on the table, and he aimed for the index finger, the one I used to point out inconvenient truths. The sound it made wasn't like the movies. No dramatic crack or theatrical scream, just a wet crunch like stepping on a snail. "Useless girls don't deserve fingers." Dad laughed, examining his handiwork with a professional interest. Maybe missing one will remind you to keep your mouth shut. Mom leaned over to inspect the damage, her nose wrinkling with disgust rather than concern. Trash gets scraps, she spat. Literally spat, the saliva landing near my injured hand. You're lucky we let you eat at our table at all. The pain hadn't hit yet, shock keeping it at bay while my mind tried to process what had just happened. My finger bent at an impossible angle, bone fragments visible through torn skin. Blood began pooling, mixing with Mom's spit into something obscene. Emma's fork never stopped moving. She cut another piece of steak, chewed thoughtfully, and swallowed before speaking. May I have more asparagus? She asked, as if her sister wasn't bleeding out across the table. But I caught something in her eyes, a flicker of emotion quickly suppressed. Her free hand moved to her pocket, checking that the recorder was still running. She was playing a role just as we all were, but for the first time, I wondered if her performance had a different purpose than survival. The drive to mercy general tested every ounce of determination I possessed. My right hand gripped the steering wheel, while my left cradled its mangled companion dish towel, now soaked through with blood that looked black in the darkness. Every pothole sent fresh waves of agony through my arm, and twice I had to pull over to vomit from the pain. The emergency room fluorescents felt like needles in my eyes after the dark drive. I stumbled to the reception desk, where a tired-looking woman barely glanced up from her computer. Nature of your visit. Our broken finger. I managed through gritted teeth, lifting the towel to show the damage. Her expression shifted immediately from bored to alert. Trauma Bay 2 right now. Nancy, get Dr. Martinez. They whisked me past the waiting room full of coughs and minor complaints, the urgency in their movements, telling me what I already knew. This wasn't just a broken finger. This was evidence of something darker. Dr. Sarah Martinez appeared within minutes, her white coat pristine despite being 12 hours into her shift. She had the kind of eyes that missed nothing, cataloging not just my injury, but the old scars, the way I flinched when she touched my shoulder, the careful distance I maintained even while seeking help. Let's get some x-rays first, she said, her voice professionally gentle. Then we'll talk about how this happened. The radiology tech positioned my hand with practiced care, apologizing each time I whimpered. The machine hummed and clicked, capturing the destruction my father had wrought in black and white permanence. While waiting for the images, they gave me something for the pain that made the world go soft around the edges. Dr. Martinez returned with the x-rays and something else in her expression. Determination mixed with a familiar anger I'd seen in other mandated reporters who encountered cases like mine. Your index finger has 3 fractures, she explained, pointing to the ghostly images. But that's not what concerns me most. These x-rays show multiple old breaks that healed without proper treatment. This finger was broken before, about 5 years ago. Your wrist shows evidence of an untreated fracture, maybe 7 years old. Your thumb has remodeled bone consistent with repeated trauma. Each word felt like another blow, evidence of a childhood written in calcium and pain. I wanted to lie, to spin some story about being clumsy or accident-prone, but the medication had loosened my tongue, and Dr. Martinez's eyes promised she wouldn't believe me anyway. My father did it, I heard myself say, tonight and all the other times, too. She pulled up a chair sitting at my eye level instead of towering over me. I need you to tell me everything, Opal, not just for the report I'm legally required to file, but because you deserve better than this. So I talked. Words spilled out like blood from a wound, 23 years of abuse condensing into medical terms and dated injuries. The Christmas beating when I was 8 that left me unable to write for a month. The time Mom held me still while Dad taught me a lesson about talking back. The systematic starvation disguised as portion control, the gaslighting that made me question whether I deserved better than scraps. Dr. Martinez took notes without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she called for a social worker, a woman named Grace Thompson, who arrived with kind eyes and a folder full of resources. "You're safe here," Grace assured me. "We can help you file a police report, get a restraining order, connect you with victim services. You don't have to go back there." While Grace explained my options, I found myself staring at the other trauma bay occupants: an elderly man with a possible stroke, a teenager who'd crashed his skateboard, a woman holding her abdomen with the universal gesture of appendicitis. Normal injuries from normal lives, not the deliberate cruelty that brought me here. That's when I heard him. The patient 2 bays over his voice carrying despite the curtain barrier. He was arguing with someone on the phone about inheritance law using terms like undue influence and financial abuse with the confidence of someone who knew their meaning. "Listen, Marcus," he said, frustration evident. "They can't just cut her out because they don't like her. If she was named in the will, she has rights. The fact that they hid the death from her actually strengthens our case." My ears perked up at the familiar situation. How many families destroyed themselves over money and favoritism? The man continued his conversation, detailing strategies for recovering hidden assets and challenging suspicious changes to estate planning documents. When the nurse opened his curtain to deliver discharge papers, I caught a glimpse of him, mid-50s, silver-haired, wearing an expensive suit despite the late hour. His left arm was in a sling, probably a shoulder injury, but he moved with the confidence of someone used to fighting battles in courtrooms rather than emergency rooms. Our eyes met across the trauma bay. Something in my expression must have caught his attention, because he ended his phone call and walked over, stopping respectfully at the entrance to my curtained area. "Forgive the intrusion," he said, producing a business card with his good hand. "James Morrison, estate attorney. I couldn't help but overhear parts of your conversation. Family violence and financial abuse often go hand in hand." I took the card with my good hand, noting the embossed letterhead and downtown address. "I don't have money for a lawyer." "Initial consultations are free," he said, glancing meaningfully at my injury. "And cases involving hidden assets often pay for themselves. My own daughter went through something similar. Her mother tried to disinherit her out of spite. We won." Dr. Martinez returned with my discharge papers and pain medication prescriptions. Morrison stepped back to give us privacy, but not before adding, "Call me when you're ready. The statute of limitations is generous, but evidence has a way of disappearing when families close ranks." After he left, Dr. Martinez showed me photographs she'd taken of my injuries for the medical record. Seeing my hand from clinical angles made the violation feel more real. This wasn't discipline or tough love or any of the euphemisms my parents used. This was assault documented and undeniable. "The social worker can arrange emergency housing if you need it," Dr. Martinez offered. "You shouldn't go back there tonight." But I thought of Emma, still at that table, still playing her role with a recorder in her pocket. Whatever game she was playing, I couldn't abandon her to face our parents' wrath alone, not when my defiance might have triggered consequences I hadn't anticipated. "I have somewhere safe to go," I lied, clutching Morrison's card like a talisman. "Thank you for everything." They wrapped my finger in a proper splint, the clean white bandages a stark contrast to the blood-soaked dish towel I'd arrived with. Grace Thompson pressed pamphlets into my good hand resources for domestic violence victims and survivor support groups. Everyone treated me with the kind of gentle respect that made me want to cry. As I prepared to leave, a notification buzzed on my phone. Emma had sent a text, just 3 words that changed everything. "Check my room." The drive home felt different now, not because the pain had lessened, though the medication helped, but because Morrison's card in my pocket represented something I'd never had before: options, legal recourse, the possibility that the law might side with the victim instead of the abusers with better lawyers. I parked down the street from my parents' house engine idling while I gathered courage. Through the dining room window, I could see them still at the table. Dad gestured animatedly, probably retelling the story of putting me in my place. Mom laughed at whatever he was saying. Emma was gone, her chair empty. Morrison's words echoed in my mind. Hidden assets, financial abuse, evidence disappearing. What did he know that I didn't? What patterns had he seen in other families that might apply to mine? The hospital bill would arrive eventually, another debt to add to my collection. But for the first time, that didn't feel like my problem to solve alone. Dr. Martinez had documented everything. Grace Thompson had filed reports. Morrison had offered hope. My phone buzzed again. Emma, they're drinking. Dad's on his third beer. Safe to come in through the back. So my sister was watching, planning, protecting me in her own way. The recorder in her pocket suggested this went deeper than sibling solidarity. Emma had been collecting evidence, but for what purpose and why now? I turned off the engine and prepared to find out. Whatever waited in Emma's room might explain why she had started documenting our family's dysfunction. It might reveal whether I had an ally or just another manipulator playing a longer game. The pain medication made me bold, or maybe it was the business card in my pocket and the knowledge that professionals had witnessed my injuries. Either way, I walked back into that house of horrors with something I'd never carried before. I slipped through the back door like a thief in my childhood home, each creak of the floorboards a potential betrayal. The sounds of my parents' laughter drifted from the dining room, punctuated by the clink of beer bottles. Dad's voice had taken on the slurred quality that meant he'd passed his third drink and entered the danger zone where violence became entertainment. Emma's room sat at the end of the hallway door, slightly ajar. I pushed it open with my good hand, struck as always by how different her space was from the bare box I'd inhabited. Trophies lined the shelves, certificates papered the walls, and everything gleamed with the polish of parental pride. Check my room could mean anything in this museum to favoritism. I started with the obvious places, rifling through her desk drawers, finding nothing but color-coded study guides and perfectly sharpened pencils. Her closet held clothes worth more than my car, arranged by season and color like a boutique display. The medication made me dizzy as I knelt to check under her bed. Nothing but pristine carpet. I sat back on my heels, frustrated and nauseous when I noticed something off about her bookshelf. Between her collection of classic literature and SAT prep guides, a single book sat spine backward, its pages facing outward. I pulled it free, discovering it wasn't a book at all, but a hollowed-out hiding spot. Inside lay folded papers and a flash drive labeled "Insurance" in Emma's neat handwriting. My hands shook as I unfolded the first document. It was an obituary dated 3 months ago. Margaret Chen, beloved mother and grandmother, passed peacefully in her sleep. The photo showed an elegant woman in her 70s, and with a jolt I recognized my paternal grandmother, the grandmother whose calls had stopped coming, the grandmother whose Christmas cards had mysteriously ended. She was dead, had been dead for months, and no one had told me. The next paper was worse. A legal document with raised seals and official letterhead, the last will and testament of Margaret Chen, leaving her estate in equal parts to her grandchildren, Emma Morrison and Opal Morrison. My name stared back at me from the cream-colored paper, proof that I had existed in someone's heart despite my parents' efforts to erase me. Behind the will, I found bank statements, not my parents' accounts, but corporate holdings for Chen Hardware Enterprises. The numbers made my head spin even through the pain medication haze. This wasn't just comfortable wealth. This was generational fortune built over 50 years of smart investments and business acumen. My grandmother hadn't just owned a hardware store like I'd assumed from childhood memories. She'd built an empire. 8 locations across the state, each turning profits that made my 3 minimum wage jobs look like pocket change. Commercial real estate holdings, investment portfolios, a business valued at $12 million. And she'd left half of it to me. My phone buzzed with another text from Emma. Found everything, come to my bathroom now. I gathered the papers and made my way to her ensuite bathroom, another luxury I'd been denied. Emma sat on the closed toilet lid, still in her dinner clothes, but with mascara tracks down her cheeks. For the first time in years, my sister looked vulnerable. "They killed her," she said without preamble, "or at least hastened her death. I have the recordings." She pulled out her digital recorder, the one from dinner, and scrolled through files. The dates went back 2 years. She selected one from 3 months before grandmother's death and hit play. Our parents' voices filled the bathroom. They were discussing medication schedules, increasing dosages, and how to make it look natural. Mom's clinical tone as she explained which combinations would mimic heart failure made my stomach turn. Dad's casual mention of inheritance timelines sounded like a business meeting rather than plotting matricide. "I've been recording them for my psychology thesis," Emma explained, stopping the playback. "I was studying family dysfunction using our household as a case study, but then I caught them planning this and everything changed." She showed me more files on her laptop, screenshots of forged documents, bank transfers that coincided with grandmother's medications, email exchanges with lawyers about modifying the will, all sent after the recorded conversations about hastening her death. "Why didn't you go to the police?" I asked, though part of me understood. We'd been trained from birth to protect family secrets, to never air dirty laundry in public. With what proof they're careful? Everything looks legal on the surface. Plus, she pulled up her medical records on the laptop. "They've been drugging me too, keeping me compliant. Look at my blood work from last month." The test results showed traces of benzodiazepines and sedatives, medications Emma had never been prescribed. The levels were low, careful just enough to maintain dependence without raising red flags. My brilliant sister, the golden child, had been chemically leashed to ensure she never strayed from her role. "That's why I've been sick so much," she continued. "The fatigue, the brain fog, the anxiety when I miss a family dinner. They put it in my food, Mom especially. She likes to cook my special meals, remember?" I remembered. Mom's elaborate dinners for Emma, prepared with love and presented with flourish. I'd envied those meals, assuming they represented affection I didn't deserve. Now I understood they were something else entirely. Control disguised as care. "The night grandmother died, I was violently ill," Emma said. "They gave me something stronger to keep me home while they visited her. When I woke up, she was gone, and they were already talking about funeral arrangements, small service family only, except they never told you about the family." The pieces clicked together with horrible clarity. Our grandmother's death, the hidden inheritance, the systematic poisoning. My parents hadn't just played favorites. They'd orchestrated a complex fraud designed to steal millions while keeping their daughters either broken or chemically dependent. "We have to leave," I said. "Tonight, take the evidence and go to the police." With your hand like that, they'll spin it as the desperate lies of an unstable daughter who injured herself for attention. And me, the golden child who suddenly turns on her loving parents. They've spent years establishing our roles. No one would believe us without more proof. She was right. The Morrison family presented well in public. Dad's construction company was respected, Mom's position at the bank gave her credibility. They attended church, donated to charity, played the part of successful parents with one successful daughter and one disappointment. "There's more," Emma said, pulling up property records on her laptop. "The hardware stores are just the beginning. Grandmother owned commercial buildings, rental properties, investment accounts. Dad's been slowly transferring everything to shell companies he controls. If we don't act soon, there won't be anything left to recover." A crash from downstairs made us both freeze. Dad's voice boomed through the floor, calling for Emma to bring him another beer. The slur in his words had progressed to the stage where violence lurked beneath every syllable. "Go," Emma whispered. "Take the evidence. There's a lawyer's card in the papers, James Morrison. He's been trying to contact you about the will. I'll handle them tonight." "I'm not leaving you here with them." My broken finger throbbed with each heartbeat, but the thought of abandoning Emma to face their wrath alone hurt worse. "I've survived 19 years of this," she said with bitter pragmatism. "I can survive one more night. Besides, they need me functional for tomorrow's meeting with the estate lawyers. They're trying to declare you mentally unfit to inherit. I'm supposed to testify about your instability." Another crash downstairs, followed by Mom's shrill laughter. The sounds of our childhood soundtrack violence and manipulation set to the rhythm of family dysfunction. But now we knew the full score, understood the financial motivations behind every blow and cruel word. Emma handed me a bag she'd prepared. More documents, the flash drive, even some cash. "Go to a hotel tonight, call that lawyer first thing tomorrow. And opal." She met my eyes with an intensity that reminded me she'd inherited grandmother's steel along with her features. "Don't feel guilty about what comes next. They made their choices. Time we made ours." I wanted to hug her but didn't know how. 23 years of enforced separation couldn't be bridged in a single moment of shared revelation. Instead, I took the bag and headed for the window, the escape route I'd perfected during my teenage years. "Emma," Dad's voice thundered, "get down here before I come up there." "Go," she mouthed, already arranging her features into the compliant mask she'd perfected. "I'll text you when it's safe." I slipped out the window and down the oak tree that had been my secret highway to freedom since I was 12. The bark scraped my palms, aggravating injuries old and new, but I made it to the ground without alerting the monsters inside. As I drove away, Morrison's business card burned in my pocket next to the lawyer's information Emma had included. 2 James Morrisons, both offering different kinds of salvation. One from the hospital, one connected to my grandmother. The coincidence felt like fate, as if the universe had finally decided to balance the scales. My phone lit up with a message from Emma. "Recording everything. They're planning to have you committed. Mental health hold for self-harm. Dad's calling his contacts tomorrow. Don't go home." So, the hammer blow hadn't been impulse, but calculation. Injure me badly enough to require medical attention, creating a paper trail of instability. Use that to challenge my inheritance, declaring me mentally unfit while Emma played the stable heir. Except Emma had switched sides and they didn't know it yet. I pulled into a motel parking lot, the kind that took cash and didn't ask questions. Tomorrow, I'd call lawyers and unravel the web of fraud my parents had spun. Tonight, I sat on a threadbare bedspread and read through every document Emma had saved. Each page revealed new depths of betrayal, forged signatures, fraudulent transfers, elder abuse disguised as caretaking. My parents hadn't just stolen my childhood. They'd murdered my grandmother and tried to steal my future. But they'd made one mistake. They'd assumed their daughters would remain forever locked in the roles they'd assigned, the disappointment too broken to fight back, the golden child too drugged to think clearly. They were wrong. The motel room walls were thin enough to hear every argument, every intimate moment, every desperate phone call from the adjoining rooms. I lay awake through the night, my broken finger throbbing in rhythm with my heartbeat, reading and rereading the documents Emma had given me. Each page revealed another layer of my parents' deception, but questions plagued me about my sister's involvement. When my phone buzzed at 6 a.m, I expected Emma's check-in text. Instead, I found 27 missed calls from my parents and a voicemail that made my blood run cold. "You worthless bitch," Dad's voice slurred through the speaker. "Emma told us everything. How you broke into her room, stole documents, made up lies about us. We're calling the police. You're going to jail for theft and assault. Come home now, and maybe we'll show mercy." My hands shook as I dialed Emma's number. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. Panic rose in my throat as I realized I'd been played. Of course, Emma hadn't really switched sides. Why would the golden child risk her perfect life for the family failure? A knock at the motel door made me jump. Through the peephole, I saw Emma standing in the dawn light, wearing sunglasses despite the early hour and a hoodie pulled up to hide her face. I hesitated before opening the door, wondering if she'd brought our parents with her. "Let me in," she whispered urgently. "Please, Opal, I can explain everything." Against my better judgment, I unlocked the door. Emma slipped inside and immediately deadbolted it behind her. When she pushed back her hood and removed the sunglasses, I gasped. A purple bruise bloomed across her left cheekbone, and her lower lip was split and swollen. "Dad didn't believe my performance," she said, sinking onto the bed. "When I tried to convince them you'd stolen the documents, he said I was lying. Said he could see it in my eyes. So he decided to make the story more convincing." She pulled out her recorder, showing me the newest file. I got it all. Him hitting me, Mom suggesting they increase my medication to keep me under control, both of them discussing how to frame you for elderly abuse of grandmother before she died. They're getting sloppy, making mistakes. "Why should I trust you?" The words came out harsher than intended. "You could be recording me right now, gathering evidence for them." Emma laughed, a bitter sound that belonged on my lips, not hers. "You think I want this? Any of this?" She pulled up her sleeves, revealing needle marks and bruises in various stages of healing. "Mom's been injecting me directly when the oral doses aren't enough. Did you know benzodiazepines can cause memory loss? I'm missing whole chunks of the last 2 years." She opened her laptop, showing me file after file of evidence she'd compiled. Not just recordings, but medical records, therapy notes from a counselor she'd been seeing secretly, journal entries, documenting her growing awareness of our family's dysfunction. "It started as a research," she explained, pulling up her thesis proposal, "the impact of parental favoritism on sibling development. I thought I was studying you the effects of being the scapegoat. Then I realized I was just as much a victim, just with better packaging." The thesis draft made for disturbing reading. Clinical language couldn't disguise the horror of our upbringing. She documented everything: the caloric differences in our meals, the financial disparities, the physical abuse I endured versus the chemical restraints she suffered. Charts and graphs reduced our trauma to data points, but the conclusion was damning. "Look at this section," she said, scrolling to a part highlighted in yellow. "I wrote this 6 months ago before I knew about the poisoning." I noted that despite receiving preferential treatment, I showed signs of anxiety, depression, and dependency disorders. I couldn't figure out why the golden child was as damaged as the scapegoat. Now I know. She showed me her blood work spanning 2 years. The levels of various sedatives fluctuated but never disappeared. Tiny amounts, carefully calibrated, just enough to keep her pleasant and pliable. The golden child wasn't golden at all, but gold-plated, a shiny exterior, hiding the tarnish beneath. "The night you left for college," Emma continued, "they celebrated. Not because they were proud of you for escaping, but because it meant they could focus on me without distraction. That's when the special meal started. That's when I began feeling sick all the time." A memory surfaced, one I dismissed as coincidence. Every time I'd visited home during college, Emma had seemed different, quieter, less vibrant, attributed to the pressure of maintaining perfection. I'd envied her position too much to recognize the signs of systematic poisoning. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, though the answer was obvious. We'd been pitted against each other from birth, trained to see the other as competition rather than companion. "Tell you what, that the parents who beat you were slowly poisoning me, that the favoritism you resented was killing me by degrees. We weren't sisters, Opal. We were their experiments in control. Different methods, same goal." She pulled out a manila folder filled with medical research. Pages on chemical dependency, Stockholm syndrome, trauma bonding. Her annotations filled the margins, connecting academic theories to our lived experience. The golden child had been studying our dysfunction with the same intensity she applied to her AP courses. 3 months ago, everything changed, Emma said. I overheard them discussing grandmother's new will, how she'd insisted on including you despite their objections, how she'd threatened to disinherit them entirely if they didn't treat us equally. That's when they started planning. She showed me a calendar with dates circled in red. Each circle corresponded to a recorded conversation about grandmother's health medications or inheritance. The evidence was methodical, damning the kind of preparation that would make prosecutors weep with joy. I couldn't save her, Emma's voice cracked. By the time I understood what they were doing, it was too late. But I could document everything, build a case they couldn't deny or deflect. I just needed the right moment to act. And my broken finger was that moment. When Dad hit you with that hammer, something snapped in me too. 20 years of watching them hurt you, telling myself it wasn't my fault that I couldn't change anything. But seeing your bone break, hearing them laugh about it, I realized I was just as complicit as them if I stayed silent. She pulled out her phone, showing me an app I didn't recognize. I've been backing up everything to cloud storage they can't access. Every recording, every document, every piece of evidence. Even if they destroy my devices, the proof survives. The motel room felt smaller as the weight of our shared trauma pressed in. Two sisters raised as enemies, discovering their common ground in the rubble of family destruction. But trust, once shattered, doesn't rebuild easily. Prove it, I said. Call the lawyer. Set up a meeting. If you're really on my side, help me fight them. Emma smiled, the expression ghostly on her battered face. Already done. James Morrison is expecting us at 9 this morning. The one from grandmother's documents? Not your hospital friend, though the coincidence is interesting. I've also contacted a medical lab that can do independent testing for the drugs in my system. She showed me email confirmations, appointment schedules, a paper trail of her commitment to justice. But one question remained heavy and unspoken between us. What about after, I asked, when they're in prison and we're left with whatever's left of grandmother's estate, do we go back to being strangers? I don't know, Emma admitted. 20 years of programming doesn't disappear overnight. But maybe we can learn to be sisters instead of competitors. Maybe that's grandmother's real legacy, forcing us together through her will. A harder knock shook the motel door. We both froze, wondering if our parents had tracked us down. Then a voice called out, "Housekeeping!" We laughed, tension breaking like fever. Just housekeeping, not the monsters who'd raised us. Emma began packing up her evidence while I gathered my few belongings. My finger throbbed, demanding medical attention I'd been postponing. There's something else, Emma said as we prepared to leave. The business manager at Chen Hardware, Marcus Thompson. He's been trying to contact you. Dad intercepted the letters, but Marcus kept copies. He knew grandmother well, maybe better than anyone. He might have information we need. Another ally in our growing coalition against our parents. The scapegoat and the golden child joining forces with lawyers and business managers to reclaim what had been stolen. It felt like a fairy tale, except our weapons were recordings and receipts instead of magic wands. As we loaded our evidence into Emma's car, she handed me a bottle of water and 2 pills. Actual pain medication, she assured me, from my sealed bottle. I know asking you to trust me is huge, but your finger needs attention. I took the pills, a small act of faith in this fragile alliance. Emma started the car, and we drove toward downtown and our meeting with James Morrison. 2 sisters raised as enemies, united by shared trauma and grandmother's legacy. I'm sorry, Emma said suddenly, for every time I ate steak while you got scraps, for staying silent when they hurt you, for playing the golden child so well you believed it too. I'm sorry too, I replied, for hating you instead of them, for not seeing your cage had golden bars, for leaving you alone with them when I escaped to college. Apologies couldn't erase 20 years of damage, but they marked a beginning. We drove in companionable silence, each lost in thoughts of what came next. Legal battles, family scandal, the complete destruction of the Morrison family facade. But first we had a lawyer to meet and a fortune to reclaim. Our parents had made one fatal error in their careful planning. They'd assumed their daughters would remain forever divided, too damaged to unite against them. They were about to learn how wrong they were. James Morrison's law office occupied the top floor of a historic building downtown, all mahogany panels and leather-bound books that spoke of old money and older secrets. The receptionist, a silver-haired woman with knowing eyes, took one look at my bandaged finger and Emma's bruised face before ushering us directly into the senior partner's office. "No relation, despite the shared surname," James Morrison said, as he stood to greet us, his handshake firm but careful of my injury. He was older than the man from the hospital, late 60s perhaps, with the kind of presence that commanded courtrooms and cowed opposition. "Though I did know your grandmother well, she was a remarkable woman." He gestured to leather chairs across from his massive desk where files already lay open. Our names appeared on various documents, evidence that he'd been preparing for this meeting long before Emma's call. "Margaret Chen contacted me 6 months before her death." He began adjusting his reading glasses. "She suspected your parents were plotting against her and wanted to ensure her grandchildren received their inheritance. Unfortunately, she passed before we could implement all the safeguards she requested." Emma placed her laptop on the desk. "We have evidence that her death wasn't natural. Recordings of our parents discussing medication, changes, forged documents, systematic theft from the business accounts." Morrison's expression didn't change as he reviewed the files, but his jaw tightened with each revelation. Professional composure couldn't quite mask his disgust at what he was seeing. When Emma played one particularly damning recording, he removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. "This goes beyond inheritance dispute," he said finally. "This is elder abuse, murder, fraud, embezzlement, and poisoning. We're not just talking civil litigation. These are serious criminal charges." He pulled out a legal pad and began outlining strategy with the precision of someone who'd fought similar battles before. "First, we secure an emergency injunction freezing all estate assets. Your parents can't transfer or liquidate anything while under legal review. Second, we file criminal complaints with the district attorney's office. This evidence warrants immediate investigation." "What about Emma's poisoning?" I asked. "She needs medical help to safely detox from whatever they've been giving her." "Already arranged," Morrison revealed. "I took the liberty of contacting Dr. Patricia Hendricks at St. Mary's. She specializes in cases of medical abuse and can admit Emma today for the supervised withdrawal. The documentation from her treatment will strengthen our case." Emma's hands trembled slightly. "How long will treatment take? They're expecting me home tonight." "You're 19, a legal adult," Morrison reminded her. "They have no authority to compel your return. As for treatment duration, that depends on what substances are in your system and how long you've been exposed. Dr. Hendricks will know more after running tests." He turned to me with sharper focus. "Now about your injuries. The hospital records from last night are crucial evidence, but we need fuller documentation. How many times has your father physically assaulted you?" The question required me to excavate memories I'd buried for survival. Each scar had a story, each old fracture a date I'd tried to forget. Morrison took notes as I recounted 2 decades of violence, his expression growing stonier with each incident. "The pattern is clear," he said when I finished. "Systematic abuse of one child while chemically controlling the other. Your parents created a sophisticated system of manipulation, but they made mistakes, especially recently. Desperation breeds carelessness." He pulled out photographs of Chen hardware locations, spreading them across his desk like a general planning battle strategy. "Your grandmother built this empire from a single store. 8 locations, all profitable, plus commercial real estate holdings worth approximately $15 million. Your parents have been siphoning funds for years, but the bulk remains intact." "How did they hide it from the board of directors?" Emma asked. "Surely someone noticed discrepancies." Morrison's smile held no warmth. "Your father appointed cronies to key positions. Your mother used her banking connections to obscure transfers, but they couldn't compromise everyone. Marcus Thompson, for instance. He owns 40% of the company and has been documenting irregularities for months. He showed us emails from Thompson detailed accounts of Frank's intimidation tactics and suspicious financial movements. The business partner had been building his own case, waiting for legitimate heirs to surface. There's more. Morrison continued, pulling out a sealed envelope. Your grandmother left this in my safekeeping. She insisted I only open it if something happened to her, and you girls came forward together. Inside was a handwritten letter in grandmother's distinctive script, along with a small key and a bank deposit box number. The letter was brief but devastating. My dear granddaughters, if you're reading this, then my worst fears have come true. Your parents are not what they seem. The key opens a deposit box at First National containing evidence I've gathered over the years. Use it wisely. Trust Marcus Thompson and James Morrison. Remember that you are stronger together than apart. All my love, Grandmother Chen. Emma and I exchanged glances. Even from beyond the grave, grandmother was protecting us, guiding us toward justice. The deposit box likely contained more evidence, perhaps documentation of abuse she'd witnessed but felt powerless to stop. We'll retrieve the contents this afternoon, Morrison said. But first, we need to address immediate safety concerns. Your parents will escalate once they realize you're working together. Do either of you have somewhere safe to stay? I've been in my own apartment for years, I said, but they know the address. My friend Sarah offered her guest room, Emma added. Our parents don't know her. She's from my online support group for abuse survivors. Morrison nodded approvingly. Good. Stay separated for now to make it harder for them to find you. Keep your phones on airplane mode except for scheduled check-ins. They may try to track your locations through cellular data. He handed us each a burner phone. For attorney-client communications only, the numbers are programmed in. If you need immediate help, call me day or night. A knock interrupted our planning. Morrison's assistant entered with a grim expression. Sir, there are 2 police officers in the lobby asking about assault charges filed by Frank and Carol Morrison against their daughter Opal. My blood ran cold. They'd actually done it, filed false charges to discredit me before I could expose them. Morrison, however, seemed unsurprised. Send them up, he instructed calmly, and please ask Gerald to join us. We'll want another witness. He turned to us with reassuring confidence. This is actually helpful. They've created an official record we can use against them. Officers investigating assault will be very interested in your medical records showing years of abuse. 2 uniformed officers entered, looking slightly uncomfortable in the opulent surroundings. Morrison greeted them professionally, immediately establishing control of the situation. Officers Martinez and Williams. The older cop introduced himself. We're investigating an assault complaint filed by Frank Morrison. He claims his daughter Opal attacked him and stole valuable documents from the family home. I see, Morrison replied smoothly. I represent Ms. Opal Morrison. I assume you'll want to see her injuries from last night's assault by Mr. Morrison. He gestured to my bandaged hand. We have complete medical records from Mercy General, including X-rays showing multiple historical fractures consistent with long-term physical abuse. Officer Martinez's expression shifted. Mr. Morrison didn't mention any injuries to his daughter. He wouldn't, Emma spoke up. He was too busy breaking her finger with a hammer for asking why I got better food. I recorded the whole thing. She played the audio from dinner, our father's casual cruelty preserved in digital clarity. The officers listened with growing concern, especially when they heard the actual sound of bone breaking and our parents' laughter. We'll need copies of all evidence, Officer Williams said, his tone now protective rather than suspicious. And we'll want formal statements from both of you. It sounds like the real assault victim here is Ms. Opal Morrison. Morrison smiled, the expression of a chess player watching pieces fall into perfect position. We'll be filing our own criminal complaints this afternoon. Elder abuse, murder, fraud, and assault. I trust you'll include this information in your report. The officers assured us they would investigate thoroughly. After taking preliminary statements and contact information, they left with promises to follow up. Their visit, intended to intimidate me, had instead created an official paper trail supporting our version of events. "Your parents just made a crucial mistake," Morrison observed once we were alone. "They've involved law enforcement opening doors we couldn't have opened ourselves. Every lie they tell investigators becomes another criminal charge." His phone rang and he answered with practiced efficiency. The conversation was brief, but his expression grew satisfied. "That was Marcus Thompson. He's at the main Chen Hardware location and has just discovered something interesting in the office safe. Apparently, your grandmother kept backup copies of everything, including surveillance footage from the week she died." Another piece of evidence falling into place. Grandmother had known something was wrong and prepared accordingly. Her legacy wasn't just financial, but evidentiary, a carefully constructed trap for the children who'd betrayed her. "We need to move fast," Morrison said, rising from his desk. "Emma, go to the hospital for your evaluation. Opal, you'll come with me to the bank to access that deposit box. Gerald will escort you to ensure your safety." Gerald turned out to be a former police detective who now worked as Morrison's investigator. His presence was reassuring as we prepared to leave, knowing our parents might be watching the building. One more thing," Zauder Morrison added, handing me a document. "This grants you temporary power of attorney for Emma while she's in treatment. If your parents try to interfere with her medical care or claim guardianship, this stops them cold." Emma signed without hesitation, trusting me with authority over her well-being, in a reversal of our childhood roles, the golden child placing her faith in the scapegoat, believing I would protect her as she had finally protected me. As we prepared to separate, Emma hugged me for the first time in memory. "Be careful," she whispered. "They're dangerous when cornered." "So, are we?" I replied, feeling the truth of it. 23 years of survival had forged strength we were only beginning to recognize. They trained us well. Time to use those lessons against them. Morrison's strategy was elegant in its simplicity: use their own actions against them, let their lies become nooses, their cruelty evidence. The lawyer's confidence was contagious. For the first time, I believed we could win. As Gerald drove me toward the bank, I thought about the deposit box waiting there. What had grandmother hidden? What final secrets would emerge from that metal container? Whatever lay inside, I knew it would bring us closer to justice. The war for our inheritance had begun, but it was about more than money. It was about truth, justice, and the right to exist without apology. Our parents had broken my finger for asking why Emma got steak while I got scraps. Soon they'd learn that broken bones heal stronger, and broken daughters could become warriors. 3 days after the lawyer meeting, my fingers still throbbed with each heartbeat, a constant reminder of the violence that had set everything in motion. Emma was safe in the hospital, undergoing supervised detox while I prepared for the performance of my lifetime. Morrison's investigator Gerald had fitted me with state-of-the-art recording equipment, a wire so thin it felt like wearing spider silk against my skin. Remember, Morrison had coached me that morning. We need them to admit to specific crimes: elder abuse, fraud, assault. Let them brag. Narcissists love to monologue about their cleverness when they think they've won. I stood outside my childhood home at 6 p.m, knowing their routines like scripture. Dad would be on his second beer, loose enough to be talkative, but not yet at the violent stage. Mom would be preparing dinner, her guard down in the domestic sanctuary where she'd poisoned one daughter while starving the other. The key still worked. They hadn't changed the locks, so confident in their control that they couldn't imagine I'd return voluntarily. The familiar smell hit me first, that mixture of Mom's lavender candles and Dad's cigarettes. That meant home to most people, but spelled danger to me. "Well, look who came crawling back," Dad's voice boomed from the living room. "The prodigal disappointment returns. Did you come to apologize for your theft and lies?" I shuffled into view, keeping my bandaged hand visible and my posture submissive. Morrison had told me to appear broken, defeated, ready to accept whatever crumbs they offered. It wasn't hard to fake. I'd worn this mask for 23 years. "I'm sorry," I whispered, not meeting his eyes. "The hospital bills. I can't afford them. I need help." Dad laughed, a sound sharp as breaking glass. "Now you need us. After stealing from Emma's room and making up stories about us, you're lucky we didn't press charges harder, girl. Could have had you arrested properly instead of just scaring you with those cops." "Frank, don't waste energy on her," Mom called from the kitchen. "Though since she's here, she might as well make herself useful. The bathrooms need cleaning." Perfect. They were already falling into old patterns, treating me like the family servant. I moved toward the kitchen, noting the dinner preparations. 2 place settings with actual plates and a paper plate set to the side. Even with Emma in the hospital, they maintained the hierarchy. "Where's Emma?" I asked, playing dumb. "Is she at study group?" Mom and Dad exchanged looks I pretended not to catch. "Your sister is getting specialized help," Mom said carefully. "She's been under tremendous stress thanks to your recent behavior. The doctors think she needs intensive treatment." "You mean the psych ward?" I gasped with practiced shock. "What happened?" "Nothing that concerns you," Dad snapped. "Though it's interesting how Emma started having problems right after you filled her head with lies. Almost like you poisoned her against us." The irony of him using that word while Mom literally prepared poison meals made my skin crawl. But I stayed in character, nodding meekly and accepting their twisted version of reality. "I shouldn't have taken those papers," I said, settling into my assigned seat with the paper plate. When I saw grandmother's obituary, it hurt that you didn't tell me. I know I'm not really part of the family, but she was still my grandmother too." Dad's eyes glinted with satisfaction. He loved when I acknowledged my lesser status, confirmed the narrative he'd built. "That's the first sensible thing you've said in years. Maybe that broken finger knocked some sense into you." "About that," I continued, keeping my voice small, "the doctor said there were old breaks too. I don't remember getting hurt that many times. Did I fall a lot as a kid?" Mom laughed, stirring something on the stove. "Oh, honey, you were the clumsiest child. Always running into things, falling downstairs, getting your hands caught indoors. We tried to watch you, but you seemed determined to hurt yourself." "Remember when she was 8, Dad added, warming to the topic. "Told everyone at school I hit her and we had to explain how she'd fallen off her bike. Social services came sniffing around until they realized what a liar she was. They were rewriting history, so casually erasing violence and replacing it with fabrication. The Wire captured every word, building the case against them with their own voices." "I'm sorry I was such a difficult child," I said, playing into their narrative. "I know Emma was easier to raise. Smarter, prettier, more deserving of good things." "Exactly." Mom beamed like I'd finally understood a simple equation. "Emma has potential. You were always just there. Taking up space, costing money, contributing, nothing. Do you know how much we spent on your medical bills over the years? All those emergency room visits for your clumsiness? How much I prompted knowing the Wire would love specific numbers."
Thousands," Dad grumbled. "Maybe tens of thousands. Should have been Emma's college fund. But no, we had to waste it on x-rays and casts for a kid who couldn't stay out of trouble."
The casual admission that they diverted money meant for my education to pay for treating injuries they'd caused was breathtaking in its cruelty, but I needed more. Morrison wanted admissions about grandmother and the inheritance. "I've been thinking about getting a second job to pay you back," I offered. "Maybe even 3 jobs, whatever it takes to make up for being such a burden. And I wanted to ask about grandmother's estate. The papers I saw said she left something to both Emma and me, but that must be a mistake, right?" Dad's expression darkened. "Your grandmother was old and confused at the end. She didn't know what she was signing. We had to help her make better decisions." You mean you changed her medications? I asked innocently, to help with the confusion.
Among other things, Mom said, bringing plates to the table. She set a beautifully prepared chicken breast in front of Dad and a matching one where Emma would have sat. My paper plate remained empty except for a slice of stale bread.
Your grandmother required careful management, she continued. Her medications needed constant adjustment. Too little and she got agitated, tried to change her will every other week. Too much and accidents happen. Accidents like her heart stopping, I pressed gently.
Dad grinned, the expression cold. Exactly like that. Though really, it was a mercy. She was suffering confused, making terrible decisions like trying to leave money to worthless grandchildren who didn't deserve it. We helped her along to a better place.
There it was. Admission of murder casual as discussing the weather. The Wire was getting everything, their confessions flowing freely in the safety of their own home where they thought no one could challenge their version of events. But the will still named me, I ventured. Doesn't that mean something?
Not when we have you declared mentally incompetent.
Mom explained patiently, like teaching a slow child. Your recent behavior proves you're unstable. Breaking into Emma's room, making wild accusations, that convenient injury to your finger. Classic signs of mental illness and self-harm. I didn't break my own finger, I protested weakly.
Of course you did, Dad said with authority. I watched you do it. Slammed that hammer down yourself trying to frame me. Fortunately, Emma saw everything and will testify about your instability. Well, once she's recovered from the trauma you caused her.
The gaslighting was so smooth, I almost doubted my own memories. This was how they'd operated for decades, rewriting reality until their victims questioned their own experiences. But the Wire knew the truth, had recorded the actual assault. Speaking of Emma, I said carefully, what kind of treatment is she getting? She seemed fine at dinner the other night.
Specialized care for anxiety and dependency issues, Mom said vaguely. The poor thing has been taking unprescribed medications probably influenced by your drug-seeking behavior. We had to intervene before she ended up like you.
The projection was stunning. They'd poisoned Emma for years, then blamed her for the addiction they'd created. Every crime got shifted onto their victims, leaving them blameless in their own twisted narrative. I should visit her, I suggested. Apologize for being such a bad influence.
Ah, absolutely not, Dad barked. You've done enough damage. Emma needs to heal without your toxic presence. In fact, we're considering a restraining order to keep you away from her permanently.
That seems harsh, I mumbled. She's still my sister.
Sister. Mom laughed cruelly. You were never really sisters. Emma is our daughter. You're just an obligation we've carried too long. If it weren't for appearances, we'd have given you up years ago.
But you didn't, I pointed out. Why keep me if I was such a burden? They exchanged another look, and I knew I'd touched something important. Dad took a long pull from his beer before answering.
Your grandmother, he finally said.
She had this ridiculous notion about family, insisted we keep you around, threatened to cut us off if we didn't maintain the pretense of one big happy family, so we did the minimum required to keep her money flowing. And it worked, Mom added proudly. She never knew how we really felt, never guessed that we were planning for the future. A little medication adjustment here, a little document revision there, and suddenly her estate plan made much more sense. You changed her will, I asked with fake awe.
Improved it, Dad corrected. Made sure the money went where it belonged to people who'd actually use it wisely, not to ungrateful daughters who couldn't appreciate the gift.
They were so confident, so sure of their victory, that they couldn't stop confessing. Each word dug their legal grave deeper, but they mistook my recording device for submission.
The business should stay in capable hands, Mom continued. Frank's been running things beautifully since Mother passed. The employees respect him, the profits are up, everyone's happy with the new management. Except Marcus Thompson, Dad muttered. That sanctimonious prick keeps asking questions, demanding to see books and accounts, like he doesn't trust me to run my own family's business. He'll come around, Mom soothed, or he'll have an accident too. These things happen in dangerous industries like construction and hardware. Another casual admission of planned violence, this time against an innocent business partner whose only crime was loyalty to my grandmother. The Wire was capturing evidence of ongoing criminal conspiracy, not just past crimes. "You'd hurt Mr. Thompson?" I asked, injecting fear into my voice. "Hurt is such a strong word," Dad mused. "Sometimes people just need encouragement to see things correctly. A little pressure here, a little threat there. Marcus has grandchildren, doesn't he? Be a shame if something happened while they were visiting Grandpa at work." The threats against children crossed another line. Morrison would have everything he needed and more. But I pushed for one final piece, the one that would ensure they couldn't wiggle free on technicalities. "If you've been managing the business so well, you must have records," I said. "Proof that you're doing better than grandmother did. The lawyers will want to see that, won't they?" "Oh, I keep excellent records," Dad boasted. "2 sets, actually. One for the IRS and authorities, another showing where the money really goes. Your mother's quite clever with numbers, makes everything balance perfectly on paper, while we redirect funds to more deserving accounts." "Our accounts," Mom clarified with a smile, "though we're careful. Small amounts over time, nothing too obvious. By the time anyone notices, if they ever do, the statute of limitations will have passed on most of it." They just admitted to tax fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. The Wire had captured enough evidence to put them away for decades, but they kept talking drunk on their own perceived cleverness. "You've thought of everything," I said admiringly. "I guess I should just accept that I'll never see any inheritance." "Now you're learning," Dad approved. "Though honestly, you should be grateful we're not pursuing theft charges for those documents you stole. Return them quietly, and maybe we'll continue tolerating your existence on the margins of our life." "I don't have them anymore." I lied smoothly. "I threw them away when I realized no one would believe me anyway. Who's going to trust the word of a clumsy, mentally ill daughter against successful, respectable parents?" "Exactly," Mom crowed. "You finally understand your place. It took 23 years and a broken finger, but you get it now." They spent another hour detailing their crimes, each confession more damning than the last. How they'd isolated me from extended family by claiming I was difficult. How they'd sabotaged my college applications while pretending to support them. How they'd planned to have both daughters declared incompetent, eventually ensuring complete control over the inheritance. By the time I left shuffling out with promises to return and clean their house for free, the Wire had recorded enough evidence to destroy them completely. They watched me go with satisfaction, certain they'd broken me once and for all. I drove 6 blocks before pulling over hands, shaking as the adrenaline crash hit. Gerald appeared moments later, having monitored everything from a van nearby. "You did perfect," he assured me, carefully removing the wire. "Morrison's gonna have a field day with this evidence. They confessed to everything." "They enjoyed it," I said, still processing the casual evil I'd witnessed. "They were proud of hurting us, killing grandmother, stealing everything, like it was all some clever game they'd won." "Pride goeth before a fall," Gerald quoted, "and they're about to fall hard." This recording, combined with Emma's evidence and the documents from the deposit box, builds an airtight case. Your parents are finished. As he drove me to the safe house Morrison had arranged, I thought about the conversation I'd just recorded. Every cruel word, every admission of guilt, every threat against innocent people was now preserved as evidence. They'd hung themselves with their own words, caught in a trap built from their arrogance. Emma texted from the hospital. "How did it go?" "They told me everything," I replied. "Bragged about all of it. We've got them." "Good," came her response. "I'm getting stronger every day without their poison, ready to fight when you need me." For the first time in our lives, the Morrison sisters stood united against our parents. They'd created us through cruelty and control, never imagining we'd turn those survival skills against them. Tomorrow, Morrison would take the recording to prosecutors. Tonight, I sat in a safe room and felt something I'd never experienced in 23 years. Justice was coming. The flagship Chen hardware store stood like a monument to the American dream, its red brick facade and hand-painted sign unchanged since my grandmother opened it 40 years ago. I hadn't been inside since I was 12, when Dad banned me from family business events for embarrassing him by existing. Now I walked through the automatic doors with Gerald at my side, the morning sun casting long shadows through the windows. Marcus Thompson waited in the back office, a stocky man in his 60s with calloused hands that spoke of actual work rather than Dad's management by intimidation style. His face brightened with recognition, though I barely remembered him from childhood visits. "Oh, Paul, you look just like Margaret did at your age," he said, standing to shake my hand carefully, mindful of my injured finger. "I've been trying to reach you for months. Your father kept saying you were traveling unreachable, but I knew something wasn't right." The office retained grandmother's touch despite Dad's recent occupation. Traditional Chinese artwork mixed with hardware store promotional calendars, creating a blend of heritage and commerce that felt authentically her. Marcus gestured to worn leather chairs arranged around a coffee table rather than across the imposing desk. "Before we discuss business," he began, "I need to know you're safe. That injury, your sister in the hospital, the lawyers involved, this isn't just about inheritance, is it?" "No," I admitted, grateful for his directness. "Our parents have been... It's complicated, but we're building a case. Mr. Morrison said you might have information that could help." Marcus's expression hardened. "Information, I have enough to bury Frank Morrison in legal proceedings for the next decade. But first, let me show you something your grandmother wanted you to see." He led us through the store past aisles of tools and supplies that smelled like metal and possibility. Employees nodded respectfully, and I noticed how they relaxed in Marcus's presence versus the fearful tension Dad commanded. We stopped at a seemingly ordinary section of wall between paint supplies and electrical components. "Your grandmother loved hidden compartments," Marcus explained, pressing a sequence of bricks, said they reminded her of the hiding spots she created during difficult times in China. This one was special. The wall swung inward, revealing a small room I'd never known existed. Inside, filing cabinets lined the walls and a modest desk held photo albums and document boxes. But what caught my attention was the wall of pictures. Emma and me at various ages, some photos I recognized and many I'd never seen. "She collected these secretly," Marcus said softly. "Every school photo, every achievement, every moment she could capture without your parents knowing. She loved you both fiercely, even when she couldn't show it openly." I touched a photo of my high school graduation, the ceremony my parents hadn't attended. Somehow, grandmother had obtained it, framed it, placed it prominently among her treasures. Next to it hung Emma's dance recital programs, report cards, newspaper clippings of my honor roll announcements that I didn't even know had been published. She knew, I asked throat-tight with unshed tears, about everything. "She suspected for years but couldn't prove it," Marcus confirmed. "Frank was careful around her, played the dutiful son. But she saw the bruises, noticed how thin you were compared to Emma, observed the fear in both your eyes. She started documenting everything about 5 years ago." He opened a filing cabinet, revealing meticulous records, financial audits showing discrepancies in the business accounts, private investigator reports tracking my parents' activities, medical records she'd somehow obtained documenting injuries that didn't match the official explanations, even psychological evaluations suggesting patterns of abuse. "Why didn't she intervene directly?" Gerald asked, photographing documents for evidence. "She tried," Marcus said heavily. "Confronted Frank once when you were 15 Opal. He convinced her you were troubled, self-harming, making up stories for attention. Then, he restricted her access to you girls, claimed you needed space from negative influences. She never got to see you alone after that." A laptop on the desk contained more revelations. Grandmother had installed hidden cameras throughout the stores officially for security, but actually to monitor Dad's activities. Marcus pulled up footage from the week before her death, showing Dad accessing areas he shouldn't have been and removing documents, meeting with lawyers who weren't part of the company's regular legal team. "This is from the day she died," Marcus said, clicking another file. The timestamp showed 3 in the morning. Dad entered the store alone, went straight to the office safe, and removed several folders. Those were her original will documents. He knew she was planning to change things, give you girls direct control instead of filtering it through him. "Can we prove those documents existed?" I asked, thinking like the prosecutors Morrison had mentioned. Marcus smiled grimly and opened another drawer. "Your grandmother was brilliant. She kept certified copies of everything in 3 locations. This hidden room, a safety deposit box you've already accessed, and with me personally. I have her original will from 2 years ago clearly stating her intentions." The will was unambiguous. 60% of the business to me, 40% to Emma, with trust funds ensuring neither parents nor future spouses could access the principal without our consent. She'd even included Marcus as a trustee, ensuring professional oversight of our inheritance. "There's more," Marcus continued, his tone growing darker. "Security footage from her home the night she died. I've been afraid to share it without proper legal protection, but with Morrison involved." The video quality was grainy but clear enough. My parents entering grandmother's house at midnight when she would have been sleeping. They stayed for an hour, leaving just before the emergency call came in about her cardiac arrest. The timestamp gap was damning. "I have run this business with her for 20 years, Marcus said. When Frank took over, everything changed. Good employees fired for questioning him. Vendor contracts switched to companies that gave him kickbacks. Money disappearing into renovation projects that never materialized. I've documented everything." He showed us spreadsheets tracking the embezzlement photographs of fake invoices, recordings of Dad threatening employees who asked too many questions. The evidence painted a picture of systematic corporate theft hidden behind a veneer of family business management. 6 months of this, Marcus gestured at the evidence. I estimate he's stolen close to $1 million, and that's just what I could trace. Your mother's banking connections made some transfers invisible even to internal audits. "Would you testify to all this?" Gerald asked, ever the investigator. "In criminal proceedings?" Gladly," Marcus said with feeling. "Margaret Chen saved my family when we immigrated. Here gave me a chance when no one else would. I owe her memory justice. But it's not just about the past. Your father's getting bolder, more dangerous." He pulled up recent emails showing Dad's attempts to force Marcus out of his ownership position, offers to buy him out for pennies on the dollar, veiled threats about accidents happening in hardware stores, references to Marcus's grandchildren and their safety. "Last week, someone cut my brake lines," Marcus revealed. "Mechanics said I was lucky to notice the fluid leak before driving. Police called it vandalism, but we both know better." The pattern was escalating. Having killed once and gotten away with it, my parents were prepared to kill again to protect their stolen empire. But they'd underestimated the loyalty my grandmother had inspired and the meticulous record she'd kept. "I need to show you one more thing," Marcus said, leading us back to the main room. He lifted a framed photo from the desk, revealing a hidden USB drive. "Your grandmother recorded a video message 2 weeks before she died. She was feeling unwell, suspected something was wrong. I haven't watched it since she gave it to me. Said it was for you and Emma when the time was right." I held the drive like it contained plutonium, knowing it held my grandmother's last words to us. Whatever message she'd recorded, it came from a woman who knew death was approaching and wanted her granddaughters to know the truth. "There's also this," Marcus added, pulling out a business ledger. "She kept personal notes in the margins of inventory records, little observations about you girls when she managed to see you, pride in your accomplishments she couldn't express openly, worries about Emma's health that now make terrible sense. I flipped through pages of my grandmother's careful handwriting. Between entries for hammer quantities and paint orders, she'd written, Opal made honor roll again despite everything, and Emma looking too thin and glassy-eyed at dinner. Frank hovering constantly. These margin notes created an inadvertent diary of her concerns. Can we take all of this? Gerald asked, already mentally cataloging evidence. Morrison will want to review everything before presenting it to prosecutors. It's yours, Marcus said firmly. Everything in this room belongs to Margaret's granddaughters. I've just been protecting it until you could claim it safely. But Opal, be careful. Your father was here yesterday asking strange questions about insurance policies and accident coverage. I think he suspects something. As we loaded boxes of evidence into Gerald's vehicle, employees began approaching me. Some remembered me from childhood, others had only heard stories. But each had a tale about my grandmother's kindness or my father's cruelty, creating a chorus of witnesses ready to testify. She talked about you constantly, an elderly cashier whispered. Said you were strong, like her a survivor. She'd be so proud to see you fighting back. We left with enough evidence to support multiple criminal charges and a video message I both dreaded and needed to hear. Marcus promised to increase security at all locations and document any further threats from Dad. He also revealed that several board members had been questioning the recent changes and might support a legal challenge to Dad's control. Back at Morrison's office, we added the new evidence to our growing arsenal. Each document, photograph, and video built an increasingly damning case against my parents. But I kept staring at the USB drive knowing it contained my grandmother's final words. When you're ready, Morrison said gently, noticing my fixation. There's no rush. Your grandmother's message will wait until you can handle it emotionally. But I needed to know what she'd wanted to tell us. That evening, in the safety of my guarded hotel room, I plugged in the drive and clicked play. My grandmother's face filled the screen thinner than I remembered, but with eyes still sharp with intelligence. My dear Opal and Emma, she began in accented English. If you're watching this, then I've failed to protect you in life, but perhaps in death, I can give you the tools to protect yourselves. Her message continued for 20 minutes, detailing her suspicions about my parents, her pride in her granddaughters, and her hopes for our futures. She revealed the locations of the hidden evidence, confirmed her intentions for the inheritance, and asked our forgiveness for not acting sooner. I was a coward, she admitted near the end. Too afraid of losing access to you entirely to confront them directly, but I've prepared everything you need to claim your birthright and find justice. Trust Marcus Thompson. Trust James Morrison. Trust each other, and know that I loved you both more than my silence showed. The video ended with her touching her fingers to her lips, then to the camera, a gesture of love that transcended death. I sat in the anonymous hotel room clutching my laptop and cried for the grandmother who'd loved us in secret and died trying to save us. Tomorrow we take her evidence to prosecutors. Tonight I mourn the relationship we could have had if fear hadn't kept us all silent for so long. But her legacy would be justice, the gift she'd prepared from beyond the grave. The district attorney's office occupied a gleaming downtown building that radiated institutional power. Morrison had arranged our meeting for early morning, believing prosecutors would be more receptive before the day's complications piled up. Emma joined us looking healthier after a week of supervised detox, but still fragile in ways that made my protective instincts flare. Remember, Morrison coached as we entered the building. Your victims reporting crimes, not defendants proving innocence. Let the evidence speak. Answer questions honestly, but don't volunteer information they haven't asked for. Assistant District Attorney Patricia Walsh greeted us in a conference room lined with law books and commendations. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-30s, with a kind of focused intensity that suggested personal investment in justice. Morrison had chosen her specifically, mentioning she'd prosecuted several elder abuse cases. I've reviewed the initial evidence Mr. Morrison provided. She began gesturing to boxes of documents on the table. This is one of the most comprehensive cases I've seen, but I need to hear your stories, directly understand the full scope of what we're dealing with. Emma and I took turns recounting our experiences, each revelation adding weight to the criminal charges. Walsh took notes in shorthand, occasionally asking clarifying questions that showed she understood the psychology of abuse. When we played the recording of my parents confessing, she listened twice, her expression hardening with each admission. "The murder confession is clear," she said finally. "Combined with the security footage and medical records, we have enough for a first-degree murder charges. The financial crimes are equally solid, but I'm also seeing patterns of long-term child abuse, assault poisoning, and conspiracy." Detective Patricia Hendricks joined us, introducing herself as the lead investigator for what was now being treated as a major case. She was older, gray-haired, with the weathered competence of someone who'd seen humanity's worst and still believed in justice. "We'll need formal statements from both of you," she explained. "Videotape depositions we can use if the case goes to trial. Are you prepared for that today?" We spent hours in separate rooms recounting our lives in excruciating detail. Every beating, every humiliation, every moment of calculated cruelty got documented in official records. The detective asked probing questions about dates, witnesses, medical treatment, building a timeline that spanned decades. "Your hospital records support everything," Hendricks told me during a break. We pulled files from every ER visit. The injuries, the explanations that don't match the trauma patterns. Classic abuse indicators that should have triggered investigations years ago. "Why didn't they?" I asked, though I suspected the answer. "Your parents were convincing. Pillars of the community, your father's construction connections, your mother's position at the bank. People saw what they expected to see. Plus, you and Emma never contradicted their stories until now." Emma's deposition revealed details I hadn't known. The gradual escalation of her poisoning. The way they'd isolated her from friends who asked too many questions. The twisted dynamic where she received material rewards but lived in constant fear of losing favor. "They told me Opal was dangerous," she admitted on video, "that she had violent tendencies and might hurt me if left alone together. I believed them for years, kept my distance out of fear. Only when I started recording them for my thesis did I realize they were the dangerous ones." By afternoon, the prosecutors had enough evidence to arrest our parents, but Walsh wanted to be strategic, coordinating with federal authorities about the financial crimes that cross state lines. The murder charge would be the headline, but the supporting crimes would ensure they never walked free again. "We'll execute search warrants on your family home and their offices simultaneously," Hendricks explained. "Based on your recorded confession, we know where they keep the duplicate books and evidence of fraud. We'll also freeze all assets to prevent them from fleeing or hiding money." "What about our safety?" Emma asked. "When they realize we're behind this?" "Protective custody if needed," Walsh assured us. "But frankly, they'll be too busy trying to avoid prison to threaten you. We're filing charges that carry life sentences. Their lawyers will be focused on damage control, not revenge." Morrison had been right about involving law enforcement. What began as a family dispute over inheritance had revealed serial criminals whose victims extended beyond their daughters. The investigators found evidence of my parents defrauding employees, intimidating business partners, and possibly poisoning my grandmother. 3 days after our initial report, everything happened at once. I was staying at a hotel under an assumed name when Morrison called at dawn. "They're moving now. Arrests at both locations. Walsh wants you and Emma somewhere secure but accessible in case they need clarification on seized evidence." We met at Morrison's office, watching news reports as the story broke. Local business owners arrested for murder, fraud, and abuse. The cameras caught Dad being led out in handcuffs, his face cycling through shock rage and disbelief. Mom tried to maintain dignity, but her careful facade cracked as reporters shouted questions. "The community is stunned," the reporter said, standing outside Chen Hardware. "Frank and Carol Morrison were respected business leaders, but police say they've uncovered evidence of horrific crimes, including the murder of Margaret Chen and systematic abuse of their own daughters." My phone exploded with messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Extended family members who'd been told I was troubled. Former classmates who remembered my injuries. Everyone suddenly understanding why I'd been so isolated, so desperate to escape. Emma gripped my hand as we watched our family's destruction play out on live television. "Is it wrong that I feel relieved?" she whispered. "They're our parents. I should feel something besides this." "Relief is what you feel when a threat is removed," I told her. "They stopped being parents the day they decided we were possessions to control rather than children to love." The police search revealed more than we'd known. Hidden cameras throughout our childhood home showed them discussing crimes we hadn't even suspected. Insurance fraud related to my injuries, claiming medical expenses they'd never paid. Identity theft using Emma's information for credit cards she never knew existed. Tax evasion going back 15 years. But the most damning discovery came from Dad's office safe. Detailed plans for Marcus Thompson's accident, complete with research on brake line failures and hardware store liability insurance. They'd been 1 week away from attempting another murder, stopped only by our intervention. "Your recording saved Marcus Thompson's life," Detective Hendricks told me later. "We found the tools they'd purchased, the surveillance notes on his routine. This wasn't impulse. They'd become comfortable with murder as a solution." The bail hearing was set for the next day. Walsh warned us that our parents' lawyers would try to paint them as upstanding citizens caught in a family dispute. The defense would claim the evidence was fabricated, that two troubled daughters were conspiring against loving parents. "Let them try," Walsh said grimly. "I've got video of them discussing murder like a grocery list. No judge will grant bail on charges this serious." That night, Emma and I sat in my hotel room processing the surreal turn our lives had taken. In 1 week, we'd gone from broken daughters to key witnesses in a major criminal case. The parents who'd terrorized us for decades were behind bars, their reign of terror ended by their own arrogance. "What happens now?" Emma asked. "After the trial, after justice is served, what do we do then?" "We live," I said simply. "For the first time in our lives, we get to just live. Make choices based on what we want, not what we're trying to survive. Use grandmother's money to build something positive instead of hiding from something negative." She nodded, then surprised me by laughing. "You know what's funny? They spent so much energy keeping us apart, making us compete. If they just left us alone, we might never have united against them." It was true. Their greatest fear had been their daughters joining forces, recognizing our common enemy. They'd created their own downfall through the very abuse meant to keep us weak. The next morning, we attended the bail hearing. Our parents entered in orange jumpsuits, the power dynamic completely reversed. They couldn't intimidate us from behind defendant tables, couldn't gaslight us with marshals present. When the judge reviewed the charges, the list seemed endless. Murder, attempted murder, aggravated assault, poisoning, elder abuse, child abuse, fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, tax evasion, identity theft. The financial crimes alone would have warranted serious time, but combined with violence, the case was overwhelming. "Your Honor," their lawyer argued, "my clients are established members of this community with no prior criminal records. They pose no flight risk and certainly no danger to the alleged victims." Walsh stood to respond, her voice cutting through the defensive rhetoric. "Your Honor, the defendants confessed on tape to murdering Margaret Chen. They have detailed plans to murder Marcus Thompson. They systematically poisoned one daughter while physically abusing the other. They have hidden millions in stolen assets and the means to flee. They are the very definition of dangerous flight risks. The judge didn't hesitate. Bail is denied. The defendants will remain in custody pending trial. As the marshals led them away, Dad turned to stare at us. The look promised retribution, but for once his rage was impotent. Prison bars would contain what our childhood walls never could. Mom kept her eyes down, perhaps finally understanding that her careful manipulations had failed. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Morrison shielded us, providing a brief statement about seeking justice for all victims of the Morrison family crimes. But one reporter's question pierced through the chaos. "Opal Emma, do you have any message for your parents?" Emma looked at me, and I saw my own thoughts reflected in her eyes. We'd spent our lives trying to earn their love, their approval, their basic human recognition. Now we had the chance to speak freely, to tell them exactly what we thought. "Yes," I said clearly, Emma nodding beside me. "We fed them a revenge they couldn't swallow. Just like they always said, trash gets what trash deserves." The reporters loved the soundbite, the poetic justice of turning our parents' own words against them. But for Emma and me, it was more than a clever quote. It was the moment we stopped being victims and became survivors. That night, we returned to the hotel to find a package from Marcus Thompson. Inside was a photo of our grandmother we'd never seen, taken just weeks before her death. She stood in front of the original Chen hardware, smiling with quiet pride. On the back, in her careful handwriting, "For my granddaughters, may you build something beautiful from the ashes of what was destroyed." We would. The criminal trial would take months, maybe years. The civil proceedings to reclaim our inheritance would be complex. The emotional healing would be a lifetime project, but we'd already won the most important battle. We'd broken free. The call came at 3 in the morning, 2 weeks after my parents' bail had been denied. Detective Hendrick's voice was urgent but controlled. "There's been an incident at the jail. Your mother attacked your sister during a supervised visit. We need you both at the hospital immediately." My blood turned to ice. Emma had insisted on one final confrontation with our parents, needing closure before the trial. I'd begged her not to go, but she'd been determined to face them from a position of power. Now, my worst fears had materialized. Gerald picked me up within minutes, his face grim as he navigated empty streets toward Mercy General. "Morrison's already there," he informed me. "Apparently your mother smuggled in some kind of chemical. Burns on Emma's face and arms. The guards responded quickly, but..." I found Emma in the emergency room, the same trauma bay where my journey had started, with a broken finger. Now she lay still, bandages covering half her face, IV lines feeding fluids into her system. Dr. Martinez was there, having been called in specially given our history. "Chemical burns," she explained quietly. "Your mother had concealed some kind of caustic substance, probably stolen from jail cleaning supplies. When Emma leaned in to hear something Carol was whispering, she threw it directly at Emma's face. The rage that filled me was pure and cold, nothing like Dad's hot violence. This was calculated fury, the kind that planned and executed rather than exploded. But first, Emma needed me present, not plotting. "Hey," I said softly, taking her unbandaged hand. "I'm here." Emma's visible eye opened, focusing with difficulty. She said if she couldn't have a perfect daughter, she'd make sure no one could. That I was ruined, now ugly like you. Even facing prison, our mother couldn't resist one final act of cruelty. But she'd miscalculated. Emma's beauty had never been about her face, but her growing strength, her courage in standing against those who'd controlled her. Morrison arrived with news that made the attack even more sinister. The jail recorded everything. Carl had been planning this for days, stealing small amounts of industrial cleaner, hiding it in a contact lens case. She knew Emma was coming prepared specifically to disfigure her. Premeditated assault with a caustic substance. Detective Hendricks added, having followed us to the hospital. Additional charges that guarantee your mother will never see freedom again. But there's more. The attack made your father panic. He's offering to testify against Carol in exchange for a plea deal. The parents who united in tormenting their daughters were turning on each other's self-preservation, overcoming marital loyalty. It was fitting somehow. They'd taught us that family meant nothing compared to personal gain. Now they were learning their own lesson. No deals, Emma said firmly despite her pain. They both pay fully. I recorded Mom's confession during the visit before she attacked. She admitted to poisoning grandmother slowly over months, said she enjoyed watching her get weaker. Dad helped, but Mom was the chemist. Emma produced her ever-present recorder, damaged but functional. The playback was chilling. Carol's voice calm and clinical, describing how she'd researched drug interactions to mimic natural heart failure. How she'd tested smaller doses on Emma first to gauge effectiveness. How grandmother had suspected near the end but been too weak to act. I told her it was vitamins, Carol's recorded voice said with satisfaction. She thanked me for taking such good care of her. Thanked me while I was killing her. The irony was delicious. This confession combined with the assault removed any possibility of leniency, but the investigation was about to expand beyond our family tragedy. That afternoon, as Emma underwent treatment for her burns, FBI agents arrived at Morrison's office, where I was providing additional evidence. We've been investigating Frank Morrison's construction company for 2 years, Agent Sarah Chen explained. Building code violations, bid rigging connections to organized crime. Your family's case gave us the probable cause we needed to dig deeper. The search of Dad's business records revealed a network of corruption extending throughout the state construction industry. Bribes to inspectors, substandard materials in public projects, kickbacks from suppliers. Every corner cut had endangered workers and residents, while enriching those involved. Your father learned from experts, Agent Chen continued. His mentor in the construction business, Tony Valenti, has ties to money laundering operations. We think Frank was cleaning cash through the hardware stores using the legitimate business to hide illegal profits. The implications staggered me. Our family wasn't just dysfunctional, but criminal on a scale I'd never imagined. The abuse Emma and I suffered was part of a larger pattern of law-breaking that treated rules as suggestions and people as disposable. That evening, exhausted and overwhelmed, I sat with Emma as she recovered. The doctors assured us the scarring would be minimal with proper treatment, but the psychological impact would last longer. She'd faced our mother seeking closure and received acid instead. I'm done being afraid of them, Emma said suddenly. The worst they could do has been done. Now we finish this. Her determination sparked my own. We'd been reactive, responding to their moves, playing defense. But we had resources now, allies and evidence. Time to go on the offensive. Morrison helped us file civil suits against our parents for damages, not just for the inheritance they'd stolen, but for decades of abuse, medical costs, therapy lost opportunities. The dollar amount was staggering, designed to strip them of any hidden assets they'd squirreled away. They'll have nothing when they get out of prison, Morrison explained with satisfaction, if they ever get out. Between state and federal charges, they're looking at multiple life sentences. Marcus Thompson stepped up as interim CEO of Chen Hardware, implementing the ethical practices grandmother had always championed. He hired back employees Dad had fired, restored vendor relationships, and began the process of making Emma and me active owners, rather than paper beneficiaries. Your grandmother would be so proud, he told us during a store visit. You've not only sought justice, but are rebuilding what they tried to destroy. The media attention intensified as more details emerged. Our story became a cautionary tale about hidden family abuse, sparking conversations about how wealth and respectability could mask horrific crimes. Support groups reached out, offering platforms to share our experience and help others recognize similar patterns. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Quarles' sister Linda, who'd been estranged for years, contacted Morrison with explosive information. She'd kept diaries documenting Carol's disturbing behavior dating back to their childhood, including suspicions about their own mother's death 20 years ago. As Carol always talked about inheritance, Linda revealed during a videotaped interview, even as teenagers, she'd calculate what things were worth, who would get what when people died. When our mother passed, suddenly, despite being healthy, I suspected but couldn't prove anything. The pattern extended further than we'd known. Carol hadn't just poisoned my grandmother, but possibly her own mother too. A serial killer hiding behind maternal smiles and home-cooked meals. The investigators began exhuming bodies, testing for toxins, uncovering a potential trail of victims. Dad, seeing the walls closing in, made one last desperate play. He offered full cooperation, complete confession, and all hidden assets in exchange for minimum security prison. The federal agents were tempted, wanting his testimony about construction industry corruption. But Emma and I held firm. No deals that reduced their suffering. They'd shown us no mercy, and we'd learned that lesson well. Let him testify from maximum security, earn whatever small privileges full cooperation might bring, but no easy exits from the consequences they'd earned. The arrest warrants multiplied as the investigation widened. Tony Valenti and his crew, corrupt inspectors, bank officials who'd helped Mom hide embezzled funds, business associates who'd participated in the fraud. Our parents had built a network of criminality, and now it all came crashing down. Local news led with the story for weeks. Morrison, crime family exposed. Daughters bring down criminal empire. From abuse victims to justice warriors. Each headline felt surreal, transforming our private pain into public record. Emma's face healed slowly, but well, the best doctors money could buy, ensuring minimal scarring. More importantly, her spirit strengthened with each passing day. The golden child, poisoned into submission, had become a warrior for truth, her recorder replaced by formal testimony that would damn our parents completely. "You know what I realize," she said one evening as we reviewed evidence with Morrison. "They created us to be their victims, but victims learn to survive. Survivors learn to fight. They trained us to be exactly what could destroy them." It was true. Every beating had taught me to endure. Every poisoning had taught Emma to document. Every lie had sharpened our ability to recognize truth. Every cruelty had forged bonds they'd tried to prevent. We were their creation, and their creation would be their downfall. The formal arrest of our parents on federal charges happened on a Thursday morning. This time, the media was ready. Cameras captured Dad, shuffling in chains, his construction empire dissolved, his reputation destroyed. Mom walked with her head high, but the bandages on her hands from the acid she'd handled told the real story. Reporters shouted questions about their daughters, about the murders, about how they'd hidden such evil for so long. Neither answered, but their silence spoke volumes. The people who'd controlled every narrative were finally definitively silenced. That night, Emma and I stood in grandmother's hidden room at Chen Hardware, surrounded by the photos she'd collected of us. Evidence of love, carefully preserved, waiting for justice to make it safe to reveal. "Oh, we won," Emma said quietly. "It cost everything, but we won." "No," I corrected, understanding something fundamental. "We survived. Grandmother won by making sure we could survive long enough to find each other. Her last gift wasn't just money, but the catalyst that united us. We'd entered this fight as broken daughters seeking inheritance. We'd emerged as sisters bonded by shared trauma and mutual triumph. Our parents had taken our childhood, our health, our sense of safety, but they'd failed to take our futures. Tomorrow would bring more legal proceedings, more revelations, more painful truths exposed to light. But tonight, we stood in our grandmother's sanctuary, surrounded by proof that we'd been loved, even when we couldn't feel it. The arrest was complete. The empire had fallen, and from its ashes the Chen sisters would build something new, something honest, something our grandmother would have been proud to see. Two daughters who'd been raised as enemies, united in justice, ready to face whatever came next. Together. The courthouse steps stretched before us like a mountain to climb, each granite tier representing another layer of justice we'd fought to reach. 6 months had passed since our parents' arrest, half a year of depositions, evidence reviews, and legal maneuvering. Now, on a crisp October morning, the criminal trial that would determine their fate was finally beginning. Emma walked beside me, her face bearing only the faintest traces of scars from Mom's acid attack. We dressed carefully for this first-day professional, but not wealthy, wanting the jury to see us as the survivors we were, rather than the heiresses the defense would try to paint us as. "Ready?" Morrison asked, flanking us with Gerald and a team of victim advocates. The media circus outside was overwhelming, but we'd learned to navigate the attention. 23 years ready," I replied, gripping the folder containing grandmother's photo, our talisman through this ordeal. Inside the courtroom was packed. I recognized Marcus Thompson and several Chen Hardware employees in the gallery, their presence a silent show of support. Behind the defense table, our parents sat in their jail-issued suits, looking diminished, without their carefully cultivated respectability. Judge Catherine Phillips presided, a woman known for her no-nonsense approach to complex cases. As she called the court to order, I noticed Dad trying to catch my eye, his expression attempting fatherly concern. I looked through him, as if he were glass, denying him even that small connection. "The state versus Frank Morrison and Carol Morrison," the clerk announced. "Charges include first-degree murder, attempted murder, aggravated assault poisoning, elder abuse, child abuse, fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy." ADA Patricia Walsh rose for her opening statement, her voice carrying the weight of truth. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case will shock you. Not because the crimes are unusual in their nature, but because of who committed them and how long they went undetected. Parents who should have protected instead persecuted. Business leaders who should have built instead stole. Caregivers who should have healed instead killed." She outlined the case methodically, each charge building on the last. The jury's faces reflected growing horror as she described systematic abuse spanning decades, culminating in murder for money. When she played a brief excerpt from my recording, several jurors visibly recoiled at our parents' casual cruelty. The defense attorney Robert Steinberg tried to paint a different picture. "This is a family dispute blown out of proportion by vindictive daughters seeking a larger inheritance. My clients aren't perfect parents, but imperfection isn't criminal. What you'll hear are misunderstandings, exaggerations, and outright fabrications designed to steal a business and destroy a family." His words might have carried weight if not for the mountain of evidence waiting to bury them, but I felt Emma tense beside me, old programming making her doubt our truth. I took her hand, squeezing gently, reminding her we had proof beyond their gaslighting. Walsh called her first witness, Dr. Sarah Martinez, from the emergency room. She testified about my injuries, old and new, the pattern of abuse written in bone and scar tissue. The defense tried to suggest I was clumsy, self-harming, but Dr. Martinez's expertise cut through their implications. In 20 years of emergency medicine, she stated firmly, "I've never seen a pattern of accidental injuries so precisely targeting non-vital areas. These wounds were inflicted by someone who knew how to cause maximum pain with minimum fatal risk. This is textbook abuse." Next came the forensic accountant who'd analyzed the embezzlement. Charts and graphs made the complex fraud understandable, showing how millions had been systematically stolen. The jury saw how our parents had lived luxuriously on grandmother's money while claiming poverty when it came to their daughter's needs. But the most damaging testimony came from the medical examiner who'd performed grandmother's autopsy. Dr. James White explained how the combination of drugs in her system couldn't have been accidental, how the dosages indicated deliberate poisoning over months. The victim would have experienced increasing confusion, weakness, and dependence on her caregivers, he explained. By the end, she would have been unable to seek help or even understand what was happening. It's one of the crueler methods of murder I've encountered. Mom's face remained impassive during this testimony, but I saw her hands clench when Dr. White described grandmother's suffering. Not from guilt, I realized, but from anger at having her cleverness exposed so clinically. On the third day, Emma took the stand. She'd insisted on testifying despite the trauma needing to speak her truth in open court. Walsh led her through the years of poisoning the medical records supporting every claim. Emma's voice stayed steady even when describing the darkest moments. "They told me I was sick," she said, meeting the jury's eyes, "that I needed special food, special drinks, special vitamins. I trusted them. Even when I felt worse after every meal, I trusted them. Because what child imagines their parents are slowly killing them?" The defense's cross-examination was brutal. Steinberg suggested Emma was a spoiled child, angry about sharing her inheritance. He implied her illness was psychosomatic, her testimony coached. But Emma had spent months preparing for this moment. "You're right that I was spoiled," she said calmly, "with poison. Every privilege came with a dose of sedatives. Every special meal contained chemicals designed to keep me docile. I have blood tests spanning years, Mr. Steinberg. Would you like to see them all?" She produced her evidence folder, medical records tabbed and highlighted. The defense attorney retreated, unable to counter hard science with implications. Emma left the stand with her dignity intact, and our case strengthened. My testimony came next, the culmination of everything we'd built toward. I told our story from the beginning, every beating, every humiliation, every calculated cruelty. The recorder playing my parents' confessions provided a devastating soundtrack to my words. "Your father broke your finger for asking a question," Walsh prompted, letting me explain the night everything changed. "For asking why Emma got steak while I got scraps?" I confirmed. "He said useless girls don't deserve fingers. Mom said trash gets scraps. They laughed while I bled." The defense tried to shake my testimony, suggesting I'd provoked the attack, that I'd been a difficult child who pushed loving parents too far. But I'd learned their tactics refused to be gaslit on the stand. "Mr. Steinberg," I said during a particularly aggressive question, "I have x-rays showing 17 different fractures over 15 years. Are you suggesting I broke my own bones repeatedly for attention? That I somehow forced my father to hit me with a hammer while my mother watched and laughed?" The prosecutor's case built inexorably witness after witness, adding pieces to the mosaic of abuse and murder. Chen Hardware employees testified about Frank's threats and financial irregularities. Bank officials confirmed suspicious transfers. Even Linda Carroll's sister took the stand to describe their mother's suspicious death decades earlier. But perhaps the most powerful testimony came from Marcus Thompson. The business partner commanded respect as he detailed grandmother's fears, the evidence she'd hidden, the systematic theft he'd documented. When he described finding plans for his own murder in Frank's office, several jurors gasped. "They didn't just kill for inheritance," he stated clearly. "They were prepared to kill anyone who stood between them and complete control. I'm only alive because these brave young women came forward when they did." The defense's case was weak by comparison. Character witnesses who'd only known our parents' public faces. Experts who tried to explain away forensic evidence. An attempt to suggest Emma and I had conspired to frame innocent parents for financial gain. But their key mistake was putting Frank on the stand. Against his lawyer's advice, Dad insisted on testifying, believing he could charm the jury, as he'd charmed so many others. His hubris would be his downfall. "I loved my daughters." He claimed manufacturing tears. Everything I did was for their own good. Opal was troubled, needed firm guidance. Emma was fragile, needed protection. If I was harsh, sometimes it was only because I cared. Walsh's cross-examination was surgical. She played his recorded confessions, asking him to explain each damning statement. His attempts to recontextualize his words fell flat against their obvious meaning. You said, and I quote, "We helped her along to a better place regarding your mother's death. What did you mean by that?" Walsh pressed. "I meant we made her comfortable," Frank tried to claim. "Comfortable by adjusting her medications that cause heart failure." Walsh produced the recording where he detailed exactly that. "Is that your definition of comfort, Mr. Morrison?" By the time she finished, Dad's mask had slipped completely. The jury saw him for what he was, a man who viewed people as obstacles or opportunities, who'd murdered his mother and tried to destroy his daughters for money. Carol refused to testify, maintaining her silence like armor, but her attack on Emma in jail spoke louder than any words. The photos of Emma's burns, the jail security footage, the premeditation involved in stealing and concealing acid, it all painted a picture of someone capable of anything. Closing arguments brought everything full circle. The defense made one last attempt to humanize our parents, to suggest their crimes were exaggerated or misunderstood. But Steinberg's heart wasn't in it. Even he couldn't fully defend what the evidence had revealed. Walsh's closing was masterful. She walked the jury through each crime, each piece of evidence, each moment of cruelty that had brought us to this courtroom. She held up photos of grandmother, of Emma's poisoned blood tests, of my broken bones. Frank and Carol Morrison had everything, she concluded. Successful businesses, community, respect, 2 daughters who, despite everything, still sought their approval. But it wasn't enough. They wanted more money, more control, more power. And they were willing to kill for it, willing to destroy their own children for it. Today, you have the power to say no more. The jury deliberated for less than a day. When they filed back in their expressions, told the story before the verdict was read. Guilty on all counts: first-degree murder, attempted murder, assault, poisoning, fraud, embezzlement. The list went on. Each guilty, another bar in the cage they'd built for themselves. Mom finally showed emotion, then her face crumbling as the reality hit. Dad turned to stare at us, his expression promising revenge he'd never be free to exact. But Emma and I felt only relief. The truth had been spoken, believed, and validated by 12 strangers who'd seen through the facade to the monsters beneath. Judge Phillips scheduled sentencing for the following month, but we already knew the outcome. Life without parole was the minimum they faced, and the judge had shown no sympathy during trial. They would die in prison, their empire reduced to a cell, their power to hurt us finally ended. As we left the courthouse, reporters shouted questions about how we felt. Emma spoke for both of us, her voice clear and strong. "We feel free, for the first time in our lives, truly free. Our parents taught us to survive their cruelty. Now, we'll learn to live without it." The cameras captured our exit, 2 sisters walking into sunlight after years in shadow. Tomorrow would bring the work of rebuilding, of learning, to trust, of discovering who we could be without abuse shaping our days. But today was for justice, complete and absolute. In the car, I pulled out grandmother's photo, the one we'd carried through every court appearance. Her smile seemed proud, knowing her granddaughters had found strength she'd only hoped we possessed. We'd honored her memory with truth and courage. The guilty verdicts wouldn't erase our scars or restore our childhoods, but they gave us something precious, the absolute certainty that our truth was real, our pain was valid, and our survival was triumph. No amount of gaslighting could touch us now. The courtroom drama was over, but our story was just beginning. 2 sisters bonded by trauma, but not defined by it, ready to build the lives our parents had tried to steal. The verdict was guilty, but we were finally completely innocent of the shame they tried to make us carry. Justice had been served. Now it was time to feast on freedom. The Chen Hardware flagship store looked different in the morning light as the new owners. 6 weeks after the guilty verdicts, Emma and I stood in the parking lot, each holding a key Marcus Thompson had ceremoniously presented to us. The red brick facade that had witnessed grandmother's dreams now awaited our vision. Nervous? Emma asked, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what we were about to undertake. Terrified, I admitted, but the good kind, like standing at the edge of possibility instead of disaster. Marcus met us at the entrance with a smile that crinkled his weathered face. Your grandmother used to stand here every morning before opening saying a small prayer for wisdom and prosperity. Thought you might want to know. Inside, the assembled employees waited anxiously. These were the people Dad had terrorized, Mom had manipulated, and we had inadvertently abandoned to their parents' management. Some faces I recognized from childhood visits. Others were newer victims of the Morrison regime. Thank you all for coming early. I began, my voice carrying more confidence than I felt. Emma and I know the last few years have been difficult. Our father's management style was challenging, but that ends today. We're not here to be your new tyrants, Emma added, her business degree finally serving its intended purpose. We're here to rebuild what our grandmother created, a company that values its people as much as its profits. An older employee, Robert Chen, no relation despite the surname, raised his hand tentatively. What about our jobs? Frank fired anyone who questioned him. Are you planning more cuts? The only positions being eliminated are the ones Dad created for his cronies, I assured him. Everyone who actually works here who contributes to our success is safe. More than safe. We're implementing the raise schedule that's been overdue for 3 years. The room erupted in surprised murmurs. Emma pulled up the financial projections on her laptop, displaying them on the break room screen. Despite Dad's embezzlement, the company remained fundamentally strong. Grandmother's business model had been too robust for even determined thieves to destroy completely. We can afford to pay living wages and still turn a healthy profit, Emma explained. Our father kept payroll artificially low to maximize what he could steal. That's over. Each of you will receive back pay for the raises you should have gotten, plus a bonus for staying loyal during the hostile takeover. Maria Santos, the head cashier who'd whispered support during our evidence gathering, began crying. I've worked here 15 years. Your grandmother hired me when no one else would give a single mother a chance. This is the first time since she died that I've felt hope for this place. The sentiment echoed throughout the room. Story after story emerged of grandmother's kindness, Dad's cruelty, and the resilience of workers who'd stayed out of loyalty to Margaret Chen's memory, rather than Frank Morrison's leadership. Marcus guided us through the administrative transition. The corporate structure Dad had corrupted needed complete overhaul. Shell companies dissolved, legitimate vendors restored, safety protocols re-implemented. Each discovery revealed new depths of our father's negligence and greed. He cut the equipment maintenance budget by 70%. Marcus showed us in the office, pocketed the difference while forcing employees to work with dangerous tools. It's a miracle no one was seriously injured. Schedule full maintenance immediately, I ordered, and safety inspections for all locations. If anything is substandard, fix it now. We'll eat the costs rather than risk our people. Emma dove into the financial records with forensic intensity. Her experience being drugged had sharpened her attention to detail, making her notice discrepancies others might miss. Within days, she'd identified dozens of fraudulent accounts siphoning money from legitimate operations. Look at this, she called me over one afternoon. Dad was billing fake consultancy fees to a company registered in Carol's maiden name. They were stealing from their own theft layers of crime like some kind of felony nesting doll. We hired a forensic accounting firm to unravel the complete web of fraud. The FBI agents working the federal case were thrilled with each new discovery, building additional charges that would ensure our parents never tasted freedom. But our focus remained on resurrection rather than retribution. We instituted employee profit-sharing health insurance improvements and educational reimbursement programs. The workers who'd suffered under Dad's iron fist slowly began to smile again, to take pride in their workplace. The transformation extended beyond benefits. Emma suggested we honor grandmother properly, creating the Margaret Chen Memorial Fund for Immigrant Entrepreneurs. 10% of profits would go toward helping others build American dreams like she had. "She would have loved this," Marcus said when we announced the fund. "Your grandmother never forgot how hard it was starting with nothing. She hired people others overlooked because she remembered being overlooked herself." 3 months into our ownership, we faced our first crisis. Tony Valenti, Dad's construction associate now under federal investigation, approached the flagship store after closing. Security cameras captured him, trying to intimidate the night manager, demanding money he claimed Frank owed him. "Your father had debts," Valenti snarled on the footage. "Family debts that pass to children. You girls need to understand how business really works." But we weren't the frightened daughters he expected. Emma called the FBI while I coordinated with private security. When Valenti returned the next night with associates, law enforcement was waiting. His arrest added attempted extortion to his growing list of charges. "You're not Frank Morrison's daughters anymore," Agent Chen told us afterward. "You're Margaret Chen's granddaughters, and people are starting to understand the difference." The distinction mattered. As word spread about our management style, talented people began applying to work for us. Former employees Dad had driven away inquired about returning. Business partners' grandmother had cultivated renewed relationships Frank had poisoned. But success brought challenges. The morning I found Emma passed out in the office, I panicked, thinking her poisoning had caused permanent damage. The hospital visit revealed a different issue entirely. Exhaustion and dehydration, Dr. Patricia Hendricks diagnosed. She's been working 18-hour days trying to fix everything at once. The trauma of systematic poisoning can manifest as compulsive overachievement, attempting to prove worth that was never in question. It was a wake-up call. In our determination to rebuild, we were risking our health differently than our parents had, but with similar destructiveness. We hired competent managers, delegated responsibilities, and learned the hardest lesson for abuse survivors: trusting others. We can't save everyone personally. Our therapist reminded us during a joint session. Creating systems that protect and empower people is more sustainable than trying to be everywhere at once. So we built systems, anonymous reporting mechanisms for problems, regular employee surveys, an external ombudsman to investigate concerns. Every protection we'd wished for during our childhood became policy for our workers. 6 months after taking control, Chen Hardware wasn't just surviving, but thriving. Sales increased as community members consciously supported a business now run ethically. The quality of service improved with motivated employees. Even competitors privately admitted we'd revitalized a company they'd written off. But the real validation came from an unexpected source. During a store visit, I encountered Mrs. Patricia Williams, my old guidance counselor, who'd helped me apply to community college despite my parents' sabotage. "I always knew you had this in you," she said, surveying the bustling store with satisfaction. "Even when they tried to convince everyone you were worthless, I saw the strength. Now, everyone can see it." Emma and I instituted monthly community events at the stores, DIY workshops, small business seminars, immigrant entrepreneur showcases. We transformed hardware stores into community centers, places where people built more than projects, but connections and dreams. "Your grandmother did this informally," Marcus told us during one packed workshop. "She'd spend hours teaching people basic repairs, helping them save money. You've just made it official, expanded her heart to fill 8 locations." The federal investigation revealed Dad's crimes had impacted numerous small contractors who'd been forced to pay kickbacks or lose work. We reached out to each one, offering restitution from recovered funds and preferential vendor status going forward. "No one's ever made things right before," one contractor told me, voice thick with emotion. "Usually the big fish eat the small ones and nobody cares. You're different." We were different because we'd been small fish ourselves, devoured by bigger predators who happened to share our DNA. That experience informed every decision, every policy, every interaction with people who depended on us. Emma's recovery continued alongside the company's. The chemical dependency our parents had forced on her required ongoing management, but she faced it with the same determination she brought to the business. Her openness about the struggle inspired employees dealing with their own challenges. "Our parents taught us that weakness was shameful," she said during an all-hands meeting, "but acknowledging struggles and seeking help is strength. This company will always support people working to overcome challenges, not punish them for being human." The policy changes we implemented rippled outward. Other local businesses began adopting similar practices. Business school students requested internships to study our transformation model. We'd become an inadvertent case study in ethical resurrection. But the moment that crystallized our success came exactly 1 year after taking ownership. We held a celebration at the flagship store, inviting employees, partners, and community members. The space overflowed with people whose lives had improved because we'd chosen building over burning. Marcus presented us with a restored photo from the store's original opening. Grandmother stood proud and young, cutting the ribbon on her American dream. Below it, he'd mounted a new photo from our takeover day showing Emma and me in the same spot, carrying her legacy forward. "She couldn't protect you then," he said quietly, "but she made sure you could protect yourselves and others now. Every fair wage, every second chance, every life improved honors her memory, better than any monument." That night, Emma and I sat in the office where Dad had plotted murders and Mom had cooked books. We'd transformed it into a space of transparency and hope, glass walls, replacing wooden barriers, open communication, replacing whispered conspiracies. "Think they know," Emma asked, referring to our parents serving life sentences, "about all this, about how completely we've erased their poison?" "I hope so," I answered honestly. "I hope they sit in their cells knowing that every cruel lesson they taught us became fuel for kindness, that their legacy is the opposite of everything they valued." The company takeover was complete, but our work continued. 8 stores across the state, hundreds of employees, thousands of customers, all part of an ecosystem we'd inherited, broken and rebuilt with love. Where our parents had seen resources to exploit, we saw people to empower. The next morning, we stood where grandmother had once prayed for wisdom and prosperity. Her prayers had been answered, just not in the timeline she'd imagined. 2 granddaughters she'd loved in secret now loved openly, creating the family business she dreamed of, one that was truly family to all who entered. The Chen hardware empire hadn't just survived the Morrison darkness. It had emerged stronger, kinder, more connected to its community than ever before. We'd taken our parents' scorched earth and planted gardens, proving that sometimes the best revenge is massive success wrapped in radical compassion. Our parents had broken my finger for asking why Emma got steak while I got scraps. Now we made sure everyone at our table ate well, knowing that abundance shared multiplies rather than diminishes. It was a lesson our parents never learned, but one our grandmother had always known. The company was ours. More importantly, we were our own. The federal courthouse in downtown Portland loomed larger than the state building where our parents had received their initial guilty verdicts. This time, we weren't just confronting family crimes, but an entire network of corruption that had infected the construction industry for decades. 8 months had passed since we'd taken over Chen Hardware, and now the final chapter of legal reckoning was at hand. "This is bigger than us now," Emma observed as we climbed the courthouse steps. She was right. Our family tragedy had exposed a cancer of bid rigging, bribery, and violence that reached into city planning offices, inspection departments, and union leadership. The courtroom was packed with reporters, FBI agents, and victims of the corruption ring. At the defendant's table, our parents sat among their co-conspirators, Tony Valenti, several city officials, and corrupt inspectors who'd sold their integrity for cash. The federal prosecutor Janet Rodriguez had built her career on complex conspiracy cases, and ours had become her masterpiece. The United States versus Frank Morrison, Carol Morrison, Anthony Valenti, and 14 co-defendants, the clerk announced. The charges read like a criminal encyclopedia: racketeering money, laundering conspiracy to commit murder, federal fraud, tax evasion, and violations of the RICO Act. Judge Michael Harrison presided, a former prosecutor himself, who suffered no fools in his courtroom. As opening statements began, I noticed Dad trying his old power moves, sitting straighter, projecting authority. But orange jumpsuits and shackles undermined any illusion of control. Rodriguez opened with devastating precision. This case represents corruption so pervasive it touches every building permit issued in this city for the past decade. At its heart, Frank Morrison and his associates turned the American dream into a nightmare built on threats, bribes, and blood. She outlined the conspiracy with charts showing money flows, organizational hierarchies, and body counts. Yes, body counts. The investigation had uncovered 3 accidental deaths at construction sites that were actually murders of workers who'd threatened to expose the scheme. Emma gripped my hand when Rodriguez displayed grandmother's photo alongside the other victims. Margaret Chen built her business, honestly employed people fairly, and died because her son-in-law wanted to steal faster than she could give. But her granddaughter's courage exposed not just her murder, but an entire ecosystem of crime. The defense tried to separate the defendants, each lawyer claiming their client was a small fish caught in bigger nets. But Rodriguez had built her case too carefully. Wiretaps, financial records, and cooperating witnesses created an undeniable web linking everyone at the defendant's table. The first week brought testimony from construction workers who'd been forced to pay kickbacks or lose their jobs. Miguel Hernandez, a foreman with 30 years' experience, described being beaten for refusing to use substandard materials in a school project. Frank Morrison personally supervised while Valenti's men broke my ribs, he testified, said it was a lesson in understanding hierarchy. My crew had to use the cheap concrete anyway. That school gymnasium roof collapsed 2 years later. Thank God it was summer vacation. The corporate fraud came next. Forensic accountants detailed how the conspiracy laundered money through legitimate businesses, including Chen Hardware. Charts showed millions flowing from city contracts through construction companies into offshore accounts, with our stores used as unwitting washing machines. Carol Morrison was instrumental in this process, the expert testified. Her banking expertise made her the conspiracy's financial architect. She created shell companies, falsified invoices, and structured transactions to avoid federal reporting requirements. Mom sat impassively through this testimony, but I saw her jaw tighten when they displayed her meticulously coded ledgers. She'd taken pride in her cleverness, and watching it dissected in open court wounded her ego more than any prison sentence. The murder conspiracy testimony was hardest to hear. Beyond grandmother, the FBI had connected the group to those 3 construction deaths and 2 attempted murders, including Marcus Thompson. Each killing was planned like a business transaction, violence commodified and budgeted. The defendants discussed murder as casually as ordering supplies. Rodriguez showed video from a wiretapped meeting. Human lives were line items, obstacles to profit that needed removal. Dad's voice on the recording was chillingly casual. Thompson's becoming a problem. Same solution as the Chen situation. Carol knows the right combinations. Even facing life in prison, hearing himself plan murders made several jurors visibly recoil. When Marcus testified, his dignity and grief moved the courtroom. Margaret Chen gave me a chance when nobody else would. She built something beautiful and honest. They killed her for it, then tried to kill me for remembering what integrity looked like. Emma and I testified on different days. Our roles now expanded beyond family victims to key witnesses in the federal case. We provided context for the financial crimes, explained the legitimate business operations the conspiracy had corrupted, and humanized the cost of our parents' greed. They didn't just steal money, I told the jury. They stole trust. Every employee who wondered if their job was safe, every customer who questioned if they'd been overcharged, every family member who learned that love came with price tags. That's what corruption really costs. Emma's testimony focused on the poisoning aspects, how Carol's pharmaceutical knowledge had been weaponized against multiple victims. She turned medicine into murder, one dose at a time. I survived because Opal saved me. Others weren't so fortunate. The defense's case crumbled under cross-examination. Their key witness, a city inspector claiming the corruption was exaggerated, was exposed as having 3 offshore accounts and a yacht purchased with bribe money. Each attempt to minimize the conspiracy only revealed its deeper tentacles. When Valenti took the stand against advice of counsel, his arrogance sealed multiple fates. Trying to portray himself as a legitimate businessman, he instead revealed additional crimes the FBI hadn't discovered. His testimony was a prosecutor's dream, each word adding years to potential sentences. Dad chose not to testify, this time having learned from his state trial mistake, but his recorded conversations provided all the evidence needed. Hours of wiretaps caught him directing bribes, planning violence, and gloating about his cleverness in stealing from his own mother. Carol maintained her silence until the very end, then surprised everyone by requesting to make a statement before closing arguments. Judge Harrison allowed it, perhaps curious what the conspiracy's architect would say. She stood slowly, her voice clear but devoid of emotion. I want my daughters to know that everything I did was logical within the system we operated in. Power respects only power. Wealth flows to those willing to take it. If that makes me a monster, then I'm a monster who ensured her children would never be victims. The statement was chilling in its honesty and delusion. She truly believed her crimes were justified, that poisoning Emma was protection, that stealing from us was preparation for a harsh world. The jury saw a sociopath revealing herself, and any sympathy evaporated. My response came during the victim impact portion. Carol Morrison claims she made us strong. She's right, but not how she thinks. We became strong despite her abuse, not because of it. We learned compassion from its absence, honesty from lies, and love from its denial. She created the opposite of everything she intended. Emma's statement was more direct. Our parents taught us that family meant nothing compared to money. So we honor our grandmother's memory by using her money to create the family she wanted, one built on respect, fair wages, and second chances. Every success we achieve proves our parents' philosophy wrong. Closing arguments brought 3 days of summation from multiple lawyers. The defense made final attempts to divide blame, minimize damage, and humanize monsters. But Rodriguez's closing was masterful, weaving together financial crimes and violent acts into a tapestry of corruption. This conspiracy stole more than money, she concluded. It stole safety from workers forced to use dangerous equipment. It stole quality from buildings made with substandard materials. It stole lives from those who stood in the way. Today, you can steal back justice for every victim. The jury deliberated for a week, sorting through charges against multiple defendants. Emma and I waited at Chen Hardware, running our business while refreshing news sites obsessively. When the call came, we were reviewing employee health insurance improvements, life continuing despite the verdict vigil. Guilty. Every defendant, every charge, every count. The RICO violations alone carried 20-year minimums. combined with murder, the sentences would be life without parole for the major players. Our parents would die in federal prison, their empire reduced to concrete cells. But the verdicts kept coming. Guilty of murdering Margaret Chen, guilty of attempting to murder Marcus Thompson, guilty of conspiracy spanning years and costing lives. Each verdict was a vindication proof that patient justice could topple even entrenched corruption. Judge Harrison scheduled sentencing for 6 weeks later, but we already knew the outcome. The federal guidelines allowed no mercy for crimes this extensive. Our parents had finally met a system they couldn't manipulate, consequences they couldn't avoid. That evening, the Chen hardware employees threw an impromptu celebration, not for our parents' downfall, but for the validation of grandmother's values. Her honest business had survived while their criminal enterprise collapsed. Truth had outlasted lies. Your grandmother would be so proud. Maria Santos told us, tears streaming. Not just that you sought justice, but that you chose building over bitterness. You could have been like them, but you chose to be like her. Marcus raised a toast with apple juice, respecting Emma's recovery. To Margaret Chen, whose granddaughters proved that love is stronger than greed, truth more powerful than lies, and family isn't about blood, but about how we treat each other. The sentencing hearing was almost anticlimactic. Judge Harrison imposed maximum sentences methodically: life without parole for Frank Morrison, life without parole for Carol Morrison, decades for their co-conspirators, financial restitution that would take lifetimes to pay. Dad turned to us one last time as marshals led him away. His mouth moved, probably cursing us, but the words didn't matter anymore. He'd become what he'd always called me: worthless, contributing nothing, deserving only scraps of human concern. Mom didn't look back. She walked to her life sentence with the same precision she'd brought to poisoning her daughter, as if prison were just another calculation in her emotionless existence. The woman who'd birthed us disappeared into the federal system without acknowledging our existence. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked how we felt. Emma answered with hard-won wisdom: we feel grateful. Grateful for the investigators who believed us, for the prosecutors who fought for justice, for the employees who stood by us, for each other. Our parents gave us trauma, but everyone else gave us triumph. The conspiracy was dead. The corruption network dismantled. Our parents' legacy of crime replaced by our commitment to ethical business. But more importantly, we'd proven that cycles of abuse could be broken, that victims could become victors without becoming villains themselves. That night, we visited grandmother's grave for the first time since learning of her death. We brought flowers from the garden we'd planted at the flagship store Living Beauty to honor her memory. The headstone was simple like she'd been, but we'd added an inscription. Her love built bridges her children tried to burn. Her granddaughters rebuilt them stronger. "We did it, Grandma," Emma whispered to the stone. "We got justice for you and salvation for ourselves. Your business thrives, your values triumph, and your granddaughters finally understand what family really means." I added my own words silently, thanking her for the strength she'd hidden in our genes, the love she'd documented in secret, and the inheritance that had saved us in ways money never could. She'd given us more than wealth, she'd given us the chance to choose differently. The federal verdict was complete. Every conspirator convicted, every crime punished, every victim validated. But our real verdict was written in the lives we'd rebuilt: employees thriving under fair treatment, communities benefiting from ethical business, and two sisters who'd transformed attempted destruction into triumphant construction. We drove home to the house we'd bought together, a place with no memories of violence or poisoning. In the kitchen, we cooked a meal together, Emma seasoning while I chopped vegetables. No hierarchy, no scraps, no poison. Just two sisters preparing food with love instead of control. "Think we'll ever fully heal?" Emma asked, voicing the question that haunted quiet moments. "Maybe not fully," I answered honestly, "but we'll keep building good things on the broken foundation."
That's what Grandma did, and look what grew from her pain us eventually, and we're pretty amazing considering. She smiled, the expression reaching eyes no longer clouded by chemicals or fear. We are, aren't we, the Morrison sisters who everyone expected to fail running a multi-million-dollar company with actual human decency? Take that genetic determinism. The verdict had been rendered in court, but we rendered our own verdict daily, choosing kindness over cruelty, transparency, over deception and love, over the fear our parents had tried to breed into our bones. Every ethical decision was a verdict against their legacy. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more growth, more chances to prove that nurture could overcome nature. But tonight, we celebrated survival and success, the two sisters who'd been raised as enemies, now building an empire on everything our parents had tried to destroy. The verdict was guilty, but we were free. Grandmother's love had won in the end, just taking a longer path to victory than anyone could have imagined. In the mathematics of justice, love multiplied while hate divided, and we were living proof of the equation. Court adjourned. Life resumed, and the Chen sisters continued writing a story our parents had tried to end with a hammer blow and a poisoned meal. Their verdict was life in prison. Ours was life, period, full and free, and finally our own. 6 months after the federal trial ended, I found Emma in the greenhouse we'd built behind our shared house. She was reporting a jasmine plant, her hands steady in the soil despite the morning tremors that still plagued her recovery. The greenhouse had become our sanctuary, a place where we nurtured growth and learned patience with ourselves. Bad night, I asked, noting the dark circles under her eyes. The usual, she admitted, not looking up from the delicate roots. Dreams about dinner tables and special meals. Dr. Hendricks says it's normal that trauma resurfaces during healing. Doesn't make it easier when you wake up tasting poison that isn't there. We'd both started intensive therapy the day after the sentencing, finally able to focus on healing with our tormentors safely locked away. Dr. Sarah Winters specialized in complex trauma, and she'd warned us the journey would be harder than any trial. Justice is external validation, she'd explained during our first joint session. Healing is internal revolution. One is finite, the other is lifelong. She was right. Some days were harder than the worst moments of testimony. Without the adrenaline of fighting for justice, we faced the quieter battle of learning to exist without crisis. Peace felt foreign, almost threatening after a lifetime of survival mode. Emma's physical recovery was measurably progressing. The toxicology reports showed her system slowly clearing the years of accumulated poisons. But psychological dependency was harder to break. She still sometimes reached for foods with specific textures, her body expecting the sedatives it had been trained to crave. I caught myself buying the same brand of juice Mom used, she confessed one afternoon. Stood in the grocery store aisle crying because part of me wanted the numbness. How sick is that? It's not sick, I assured her. It's programming. We're not just healing from events, but from decades of conditioning. Be patient with yourself. My own healing looked different, but was equally challenging. The hypervigilance that had kept me safe now fired at innocent stimuli. A raised voice made me flinch. Unexpected movements triggered defensive postures. My body remained convinced that danger lurked everywhere despite our parents' incarceration. Therapy sessions were archaeological digs through layers of trauma. We excavated memories, examined patterns, and slowly rebuilt our self-concepts without abuse as the foundation. Some revelations surprised even us. I don't know who I am without being the family failure, I admitted during one session. That identity was horrible, but it was mine. Now I'm successful, respected, and I feel like I'm wearing a costume that doesn't fit. Because you're trying to be the opposite of what they said, Dr. Winters observed. But healing isn't about becoming their inverse. It's about discovering who you actually are beneath their projections.
Emma faced similar identity crises. I was the golden child, but that was just another cage. Everything I achieved was for their approval through their chemical haze. My accomplishments feel tainted like they belong to someone else. We started separating our achievements from our parents' influence. Emma's intelligence existed despite the poisoning, not because of it. My resilience grew from inner strength, not just external pressure. Slowly, we reclaimed pieces of ourselves as genuinely ours. The business became part of our healing. Every fair policy we implemented, every employee we treated with respect, every ethical decision we made was a repudiation of our parents' worldview. Chen Hardware thrived under compassionate leadership, proving that success didn't require cruelty. You're rewriting the definition of power, Marcus observed during a board meeting. Your parents thought power meant domination. You're showing it means lifting others up. We instituted mental health benefits for all employees, understanding firsthand how crucial psychological support was. The company partnered with local therapists to provide free services. Several workers privately thanked us for normalizing therapy in a blue-collar environment. Physical healing intertwined with emotional recovery. Emma joined a boxing gym, channeling her anger into powerful strikes against bags instead of herself. I took up swimming, finding peace in the repetitive strokes and controlled breathing. Our bodies slowly learned they were safe. What movement helps process trauma, our therapist explained. Your bodies held these experiences. They need to physically release what talk therapy addresses mentally. Food remained complicated. Emma worked with a nutritionist who specialized in recovery from poisoning. Every meal plan was transparent, every ingredient disclosed. She learned to cook for herself, taking control of what entered her body for the first time. I had the opposite challenge. Years of scarcity had left me hoarding food, unable to trust abundance. Our pantry overflowed with my anxiety, made tangible. Therapy helped me understand that full shelves couldn't fill emotional starvation. We attended support groups for abuse survivors, finding community with others who understood. Hearing their stories validated our experiences while showing that healing was possible. One woman, 15 years into recovery, became an informal mentor. The nightmares fade, she promised. The triggers lose power. You'll never forget, but you'll stop being controlled by the memories. One day, you'll realize you went a whole week without thinking about them. That's victory. Medication helped stabilize the trauma responses. Anti-anxiety prescriptions, carefully monitored given Emma's history, took the edge off panic attacks. Sleep aids quieted the nightmares. We learned that accepting pharmaceutical help wasn't weakness, but wisdom. Your brain chemistry was altered by prolonged trauma, the psychiatrist explained. Medication helps restore balance, while therapy addresses the root causes. It's like setting a broken bone, you need the cast while healing happens underneath. Anniversaries were particularly difficult. The date of grandmother's death, the night of the hammer incident, Emma's first poisoning. Our bodies remembered even when we tried to forget, manifesting anxiety physically around significant dates. We created new rituals to overwrite the painful associations. Grandmother's death date became our day to volunteer at immigrant services. The hammer anniversary was marked by donating to domestic violence shelters. We transformed traumatic timestamps into opportunities for service. Dating seemed impossible initially. Trust felt too fragile to extend to romantic partners. But slowly, carefully, we began exploring connections. Emma met David through her boxing gym, a pediatric nurse who understood trauma from his work with hurt children. He doesn't try to fix me, she told me after their third date, just accepts that I'm healing and offers to hold space for whatever I need. It's revolutionary after parents who demanded performance. I found connection with Dr. Amy Chen, no relation, a social worker I met at a conference on trauma-informed business practices. She understood why I flinched at unexpected touches and never pushed for explanations I wasn't ready to give. "We're learning to accept love," I told Emma one evening. "Real love, not the transactional manipulation our parents called love. It's terrifying." But worth it," she replied, showing me the ceramic bowl David had made for her birthday. "To be seen as whole while acknowledging we're still mending. That's what love actually looks like." Recovery wasn't linear. Some days we backslid old patterns reasserting themselves. Emma would skip meals unconsciously, recreating the food scarcity I'd experienced. I'd work obsessive hours trying to prove worth that didn't need proving. But we caught each other gentle accountability between sisters who understood. "You're doing it again" became our shorthand for noticing destructive patterns. No judgment, just observation and redirection. We were each other's mirrors, reflecting healing and harm with equal clarity. Art therapy unlocked expressions words couldn't capture. Emma's paintings evolved from dark abstracts to increasingly colorful landscapes. My sculptures started angular and defensive, gradually softening into flowing forms. The art room in our house became a visual journal of recovery. "Creation is the opposite of destruction," Dr. Winters noted. "Every piece you make is proof that you can build beauty from pain." We surprised ourselves with moments of genuine joy, laughing at comedy shows without guilt, dancing badly in our kitchen without fear, experiencing pleasure that wasn't stolen from someone else's pain. These glimpses of normalcy felt like miracles. The employees at Chen Hardware became extended family. Their children called us Aunt Opal and Aunt Emma. Relationships built on affection rather than obligation. We attended their celebrations, grieved their losses, and slowly learned what healthy family actually meant. "You gave us more than jobs," Maria told us at the company picnic. "You gave us dignity. That spreads to our families, our communities. Your healing helps us all heal." Letters arrived occasionally from prison. We'd instructed the lawyers to screen them, but curiosity sometimes won. Dads were predictable blame-rage demands for money. Moms were more chilling clinical analyses of where her plans had failed, like academic papers on attempted murder. "They haven't changed," Emma observed after reading one. "Still convinced they were right, we were wrong. Prison is just an inconvenient interruption to their worldview." We burned the letters ceremonially, watching their words become ash. No response was needed. Our lives were response enough, thriving, healing, building everything they tried to destroy. Their letters were echoes from a past that no longer defined us. Travel helped expand our world beyond trauma. We visited Chen Hardware locations across the state, meeting employees and communities. Each store reflected local character while maintaining grandmother's values. We were building a legacy of decency. International trips challenged us more. Leaving the country felt like abandoning safety, but Dr. Winters encouraged stretching our comfort zones. Emma chose Japan, drawn to gardens and order. I picked New Zealand, craving natural beauty and distance. "We can be ourselves there," Emma said before departing. "No one knows our story. We're just tourists, not survivors. It's liberating and terrifying." The trips were transformative. Emma found peace in Japanese tea ceremonies, rituals of precision without poison. I hiked mountains that made me feel simultaneously small and powerful. We returned with broader perspectives and proof we could exist beyond our trauma. Birthdays became reclamation projects. Our parents had weaponized celebrations, making them competitions or deprivations. Now we created new traditions, joint parties where we celebrated each other, gifts that were thoughtful rather than transactional, cakes with no hidden ingredients, just sugar and love. "Happy birthday to us." Emma toasted on our first shared celebration. "May we have many more, each healthier than the last." The healing journey had no clear endpoint. We measured progress in increments, fewer nightmares, longer periods between panic attacks, moments of trusting our worth. Some days were still hard ghosts of old pain haunting new joy, but the trajectory was upward, spiraling toward light. "Are we healed yet?" Emma asked during a particularly good week. "We're healing," I corrected. "Present continuous, not past complete. And that's enough." She nodded, understanding the distinction. Healing wasn't a destination, but a practice. Every therapy session, every healthy boundary, every moment of self-compassion was healing in action. We were works in progress, and progress was beautiful. A year into intensive therapy, Dr. Winters had us write letters to our younger selves. The exercise was agonizing but cathartic. Emma told her child self that the sickness wasn't her fault. I assured young Opal that she deserved food, love, and safety. We read them aloud, voices breaking, finally offering ourselves the validation our parents had withheld. "You're parenting yourselves," Dr. Winters observed, "giving your inner children what they needed. That's profound healing work." The greenhouse thrived under our care plants, growing strong in good soil and proper light. Like us, they needed the right environment to flourish. We tended them daily, finding metaphors in new growth and occasional setbacks. "Look," Emma said one morning, showing me where the jasmine had bloomed. "Remember when we thought it was too damaged to survive, but we kept watering, kept believing. And now?" The delicate white flowers released their perfume beauty arising from careful tending. We were like that jasmine, damaged but not destroyed, blooming in our own time, filling the world with unexpected sweetness. Our healing journey continued, would always continue, but we traveled it together, two sisters who'd found each other in the wreckage of childhood and chosen to rebuild rather than remain in ruins. Every day brought new challenges and new victories, small steps on the long path to wholeness. The journey was a destination, and we were exactly where we needed to be. 1 year after the federal trial, spring arrived like a promise kept. Emma and I stood in the flagship Chen hardware store watching contractors put finishing touches on the Margaret Chen Community Center we'd built in the adjacent lot. What had once been an abandoned warehouse would soon serve immigrants and refugees, offering everything from English classes to small business mentoring. "She would have loved this," Emma said, clutching the ceremonial scissors we'd use for the ribbon cutting. "Grandmother always said America gave her a chance. Now we're giving others the same opportunity." The transformation in our lives was measurable, but still felt surreal. Emma had returned to school pursuing her doctorate in trauma psychology with a focus on family systems. Her thesis advisor called her work groundbreaking, combining lived experience with academic rigor. "You're not just studying trauma," Dr. Patricia Kim had told her. "You're mapping survival and recovery in ways that will help thousands. Your parents gave you pain, but you're transforming it into healing for others." I'd taken a different path, earning my nursing degree while running the business. The morning shifts at the free clinic we'd established fulfilled something money couldn't touch. Treating people who reminded me of my younger self, scared, hurt, convinced they deserved pain, let me offer the compassion I'd once desperately needed. Nurse Opal. My supervisor had said during my evaluation, "You have an uncanny ability to spot abuse victims. You see what others miss and create safe spaces for disclosure. That's a gift born from experience." The business thrived beyond our wildest projections. Chen Hardware had expanded to 12 locations, each anchored by community programs. We'd implemented profit sharing so aggressive that several employees had bought homes for the first time. Their success was our success, a philosophy that would have baffled our parents. But the personal growth mattered more than financial gains. I'd been dating Amy for 8 months, learning to accept affection without suspicion. She understood my triggers, never took my healing personally, and celebrated small victories like the first time I fell asleep in her arms without nightmares. "You're learning to receive love," she observed one evening, "not perform for it or earn it. Just receive it as your birthright. That's beautiful to witness." Emma's relationship with David had deepened similarly. He'd proposed last month in the greenhouse, understanding that plants and growth held special meaning for her. The ring was modest by our new financial standards, but perfect in its symbolism, a continuous circle with no sharp edges to wound. "I want to build a life with you," he'd said, "not despite your past, but including it, because every experience made you who you are. And who you are is extraordinary." We'd cried together that night, Emma and I, marveling at finding partners who saw us as whole rather than broken. The wedding planning became another healing exercise, creating the family celebration we'd never had. Marcus Thompson walked Emma down the aisle on a perfect May afternoon. The hardware store employees filled the guest seats, our chosen family, witnessing love without conditions. When the officiant asked who gave this woman in marriage, Marcus replied, "She gives herself with the blessing of all who love her." David's vows acknowledged Emma's journey. "I promise to love you through healing and setbacks, to honor your strength, and hold space for your vulnerability. Your courage in facing trauma inspires me to be a better man. I choose you, all of you, forever." Emma's response was equally powerful. "You see me without the poison beyond the roles I was forced to play. With you, I'm neither golden child nor victim, but simply Emma. I promise to keep choosing recovery, choosing growth, choosing us." Amy caught the bouquet, winking at me with promise. We'd already discussed marriage, but I needed more time. Not from doubt, but from determination to enter union as a complete person, rather than seeking completion through another. The reception was held at Chen Hardware's original location, transformed with lights and flowers, but maintaining its authentic character. Grandmother's portrait presided over the celebration, her smile seeming to bless the joy she'd been denied witnessing in life. To Margaret Chen. Marcus toasted, who planted seeds of love in hostile soil. Those seeds survived, grew strong, and now bloom for all to see. Her granddaughters are her greatest success. We danced until midnight, employees and executives mixing freely, children running between tables, love flowing as freely as the champagne. No hierarchy, no favorites, no poison, just humans celebrating human connection. The honeymoon was brief. Emma couldn't be away from her dissertation long but meaningful. They visited the Grand Canyon. Emma fascinated by how time and pressure had created such beauty from raw stone. Metaphors for healing were everywhere if you looked. I used the week to move into Amy's apartment, a step that would have been unthinkable a year ago. Sharing space meant vulnerability, trusting another with my daily rhythms and private moments. But Amy made it easy, creating room for my needs without sacrificing her own. "Welcome home," she said when I'd unpacked the last box. The words hit deeper than expected. Home had never been safe before. Now it meant Amy's arms, Emma's laughter, the business we'd built on ethical foundations. Home was everywhere our parents weren't. Work continued evolving. The community center's opening drew city officials, nonprofit leaders, and hundreds of immigrants seeking services. We'd partnered with established organizations, leveraging expertise rather than reinventing wheels. The center offered legal aid, job training, childcare, and counseling, everything newcomers needed to build American dreams. "You're not just giving back," the mayor said at the opening. "You're investing in our city's future. Every family you help strengthens our entire community." Emma had insisted on trauma-informed design for the center. Soft lighting instead of harsh fluorescence. Multiple exits in every room so no one felt trapped. Transparent policies posted clearly so people knew what to expect. Details that mattered to those who lived with unpredictability as violence. "Healing happens in safe spaces," she explained to the architects. "We're not just building rooms, but creating environments where trust can grow." The first clients arrived tentatively suspicious of free services without hidden costs. But word spread quickly through immigrant communities that the Chen granddaughters honored their grandmother's memory with genuine help. Soon we had waiting lists for every program. I volunteered teaching basic medical English, helping future nurses navigate terminology that had once confused me too. Emma ran support groups for teenage daughters of immigrants, creating space for bicultural identity struggles. We saw ourselves in every face-remembered grandmother, in every story of leaving everything for uncertain possibilities.
Yeah, you saved my life, one young woman told Emma after group. My parents expect perfection while calling me ungrateful. You're the first person who understood without judging.
These moments made everything worthwhile, the legal battles, the therapy, the daily choice to build rather than burn. We were interrupting cycles of harm, creating ripples of healing that would outlast us. Chen Hardware's success attracted acquisition offers from major chains. The numbers were staggering enough to never work again, but Marcus laughed when we brought the proposals to the board meeting.
Your grandmother turned down bigger offers 20 years ago, he revealed, said independence mattered more than easy money. Besides, what would happen to our employees, our communities, if corporate profits became the only measure?
We declined every offer, choosing legacy over liquidity. The business wasn't just income, but identity, not just grandmother's creation, but our recreation. Selling would feel like selling her memory, our healing everything we'd built from ashes. Instead, we created an employee ownership program. Over time, workers could acquire shares, ensuring the company's values would outlast the Chen family's direct involvement. The announcement brought tears and cheers at the all-hands meeting.
You're giving us more than ownership, Roberto, our warehouse manager, said. You're trusting us with something sacred. We won't let you down. Personal milestones accumulated like treasures. Emma's first published paper on recovery from systematic poisoning. My certification as a trauma-informed care specialist. Amy's promotion to clinic director. David's graduation from physician assistant school. Each achievement was celebrated by our chosen family joy, multiplied through sharing. We visited our parents once separately to deliver legal documents requiring their signatures for final asset transfers. The meetings were brief, controlled necessary closure rather than reconciliation attempts. Dad had aged decades in 2 years. His bullying posture collapsed into bitter defeat. You destroyed everything, he accused from behind reinforced glass. We rebuilt everything you destroyed, I corrected calmly. The difference matters. Mom remained unchanged, analyzing me like a specimen. Interesting recovery trajectory. I underestimated your resilience coefficient. A miscalculation I won't repeat. You won't get the chance, Emma told her flatly. This is goodbye, Carol. Not mother, just Carol. You're a case study now, nothing more. We left the prison without looking back, closing that chapter permanently. They lived, but were dead to us, ghosts of a past we'd survived rather than people who deserved space in our futures. The therapy continued, but shifted focus. Instead of excavating trauma, we built skills for sustainable joy. Dr. Winters introduced concepts like post-traumatic growth, the possibility that surviving horror could create strength beyond simple recovery. You're not just returning to baseline, she explained. You're exceeding what might have been possible without the catalyst of trauma. It's not grateful for the pain, but grateful for your response to it. This reframe helped enormously. We weren't broken, people patched together, but architects who'd used rubble as building material. Every scar was a weld line making us stronger at the broken places. Our parents had provided the pressure that created diamonds from coal. To new beginnings, Amy toasted at our combined birthday celebration, and the courage to keep beginning over and over each time with more wisdom. The party filled our backyard employees, friends, chosen family, and a few biological relatives who'd reached out after the trials. Aunt Linda, Mom's sister, had become particularly close, her own healing journey paralleling ours. I spent 40 years wondering if I was crazy for suspecting Carol, she told us. You gave me validation and the courage to examine my own trauma. That's a gift beyond measure. As midnight approached, Emma and I stood together surveying the celebration.
Children played on the swing set we'd installed for employee gatherings. Adults laughed around fire pits, sharing stories and dreams. Love filled every corner, the kind our parents had hoarded and weaponized, now flowing freely. Look what we built from their ashes, Emma marveled. A whole life, a whole family, a whole future they tried to steal. The best revenge really is living well, I agreed, though I prefer thinking of it as a best justice. We're not performing happiness to hurt them. We're genuinely happy despite them. The distinction mattered. Our joy wasn't reactive, but authentic, not designed for anyone's observation, but emerging from genuine healing. We'd stopped being characters in their story and become authors of our own. As guests departed with hugs and promises of future gatherings, Amy and David helped clean up. The easy domesticity felt miraculous, for people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company, sharing labor without keeping score. I love our life, Emma said suddenly, apropos of nothing and everything. Despite everything? No, because of everything, I love who we've become and what we're building. To grandmother's legacy, I replied, raising my water glass, and to proving that love multiplies when shared freely. We toasted under stars that had witnessed our worst nights and now blessed our best. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, running, businesses pursuing careers, nurturing relationships, continuing the endless work of healing. But tonight was for gratitude, for survival that had become thrival, for the sister I'd found in the ashes of rivalry, for the love that had replaced fear, for the future our parents had tried to steal but only managed to make more precious by its near loss. Our new beginning wasn't a single moment, but a daily choice. Every morning we woke up and chose healing over hatred, building over bitterness, love over the legacy of pain. Some days a choice was easier than others, but we never stopped choosing. In the end, that's what new beginnings really were, not fresh starts that erased the past, but conscious decisions to write different endings. Our parents had written a tragedy. We'd grabbed the pen and turned it into a story of triumph. The beginning was just beginning, and we were ready for whatever came next. 5 years had passed since that night my father shattered my finger with his hammer. 5 years since asking why Emma got steak while I got scraps had triggered an avalanche that buried our abusers and freed their victims. Now, on a glorious June morning, I stood in my childhood home, transformed beyond recognition into the Chen House, a transitional living facility for domestic abuse survivors. Hard to believe it's the same place, Emma said beside me, her hand resting on her pregnant belly. At 7 months along, she glowed with the kind of health our mother had tried to steal from her. Every room that held terror now holds hope. We'd bought the property from the federal asset forfeiture auction, outbidding developers who wanted to demolish it for condos. Instead, we'd exorcise its demons through renovation, turning each space of pain into sanctuary for others, escaping similar hells. The dining room, where I'd bled over scraps, now hosted communal meals where everyone ate the same nutritious food. The kitchen where Mom had prepared poison had been retrofitted with an open design. No secrets, no hidden ingredients, just nourishment prepared with transparency. Ms. Chen, a small voice called out, and I turned to see Maria, the 5-year-old daughter of our newest resident. She ran over with a picture she'd drawn, a house with hearts for windows and a rainbow overhead. "Is this our house?" I asked, kneeling to her level. "It's the happy house," she explained seriously. "Mama says we're safe here, no more hurting." Her mother, Jessica, joined us, still bearing fading bruises from her escape 2 weeks ago. "Maria hasn't had nightmares since we arrived. First time in months. This place, it's healing us already." That was the intention. Emma had insisted on trauma-informed design throughout, soft colors, curved edges instead of sharp corners, multiple exits, and abundant natural light. We'd hired Dr. Patricia Hendricks, who'd overseen Emma's detox, to train our staff in recognizing and responding to trauma symptoms. "Ready for the ceremony?" Marcus asked, joining our group. At 72, he remained spry and sharp, still serving as Chen Hardware's chairman, while mentoring the employee owners who'd gradually taken over operations. "Your grandmother would burst with pride today." The dedication ceremony for the Chen House was set to begin in an hour. City officials, domestic violence advocates, and trauma specialists would gather to celebrate the transformation of a site of horrors into a beacon of hope. But first, we had a private ritual to complete. Emma and I climbed to what had been our childhood bedrooms. Mine, once bare and cold, now welcomed residents with warm colors and comfortable furnishings. Emma's former palace of poisoning had become a children's playroom filled with toys and books instead of trophies for performance. "Remember when we thought escape was the best we could hope for?" Emma asked, running her hand along the windowsill where she'd hidden her recorder. "Now we're creating escape routes for others." We'd installed a memorial plaque where our parents' bedroom had been now converted to counseling offices. It read, "In memory of all who suffered in silence. Your voices are heard. Your pain is witnessed. Your healing begins here." The irony wasn't lost on us. Our parents had created a torture chamber disguised as a home. We'd transformed their torture chamber into an actual home for those fleeing similar disguises. Every family sheltered here was a repudiation of Frank and Carol Morrison's legacy. Amy arrived with the flowers for the ceremony, kissing me hello with casual affection that still amazed me. We'd married 2 years ago in a quiet ceremony at Chen Hardware, surrounded by chosen family and survivors who'd become friends. She'd taken my name, not Morrison, which I'd legally dropped, but Chen, honoring the grandmother whose love had saved us. "The news crews are setting up," Amy reported. "They want to interview you both about the journey from victims to advocates. Are you ready for that?" "We've been ready for years," Emma replied. "Our story only has power if it helps others recognize their own situations and find hope for escape." We'd become reluctant public figures sharing our trauma to illuminate the hidden epidemic of family abuse. Emma's doctoral dissertation had become a best-selling book, Golden Cages When Privilege Hides Poison. My own memoir, Scraps to Substance Building a Life from Broken Pieces, had funded scholarships for abuse survivors pursuing healthcare careers. The ceremony began with Marcus cutting the ribbon, his weathered hands steady as he sliced through the red silk. "Margaret Chen believed in second chances," he said to the assembled crowd. "Her granddaughters have created a place where second chances bloom into new lives." Survivors spoke about finding safety within these walls. Advocates praised the comprehensive approach, not just shelter, but therapy, legal aid job training, and childcare. City officials acknowledged that private funding had accomplished what public budgets couldn't. But the most powerful moment came when a surprise speaker took the podium. Linda Morrison, our aunt, had remained part of our lives, her own healing journey paralleling ours. Now she stood before the crowd, voice strong despite visible emotion. "My sister Carol and her husband Frank committed monstrous acts in this house," she said bluntly. "As a family member who suspected but didn't act, I carry guilt for my silence. But Opal and Emma have transformed family shame into community service. They've proven that cycles can be broken, that evil doesn't have the last word." She presented us with a check from the Morrison Family Foundation extended relatives, pooling resources to support the Chen House. "We can't undo the past," Linda explained, "but we can invest in a different future, one where family means protection, not predation." The crowd erupted in applause, but Emma and I were crying too hard to speak immediately. This was healing at its deepest level, not just personal recovery, but familial redemption. The Morrison name synonymous with abuse now supported healing. David joined us on stage, protective arm around Emma's expanding waist. Our daughter will be born into a world where her mother and aunt have made safety possible for so many, he said. She'll grow up knowing that strength isn't domination, but the courage to transform pain into purpose. I thought of the baby Emma carried the next generation who would know only love and safety. We'd broken the cycle so definitively that our children would struggle to comprehend the darkness we'd survived. That incomprehension would be our greatest gift to them. Our parents fed us a diet of cruelty and controls, I said when I could finally speak. They believed power meant making others smaller, but we've discovered that real power is helping others grow. Every survivor who finds healing here proves our parents' philosophy wrong. Emma added, Frank and Carol Morrison are serving life sentences in prison, but their true punishment is this, watching their house of horrors become a sanctuary. Their legacy of pain transformed into intergenerational healing. We fed them a revenge they couldn't swallow, the triumph of love over fear. The phrase had become our motto, printed on Chen house materials and Chen hardware bags alike. It captured the poetic justice of our journey, using our parents' own words to describe their defeat. After the ceremony, we gave tours to major donors considering support. The basement where Dad had stored his tools of violence now housed a children's art therapy room. The garage where he'd hidden financial crimes had become a computer lab for job training. Every space had been reclaimed, repurposed, redeemed. How do you afford all this? A potential donor asked. The comprehensive services must be expensive. Chen Hardware funds operations, Emma explained. Our business profits go to healing the kind of wounds that created our business success. It's full circle grandmother's American dream, supporting other women's escapes from nightmares. We'd structured everything to be sustainable. The business thrived under employee ownership, generating steady profits. The Chen House had an endowment ensuring it would outlast us. The Margaret Chen Foundation funded immigrant entrepreneurs. Every entity reinforced the others, creating an ecosystem of support. As afternoon faded to evening, the formal visitors departed, leaving just family chosen and biological. We gathered in the transformed dining room for a meal prepared by residents who'd found safety here. The table that had once segregated Emma and me by worth now seated 20 people as equals. I need to share something, I announced as dessert was served. Amy and I have news. Amy smiled, taking my hand. We're adopting 2 siblings from foster care ages 6 and 8. They've experienced trauma but haven't given up on family. Neither have we. The table erupted in congratulations. Emma hugged me tightly, whispering, Our children will never doubt their worth, never compete for scraps, never wonder if they're loved. They'll probably wonder why we cry at weird moments, I replied, why certain sounds make us flinch. But they'll also see us choosing healing every single day. That's the inheritance that matters. Marcus stood for a toast, raising his glass of sparkling cider. To Margaret Chen, whose love planted seeds in hostile ground. To her granddaughters who watered those seeds with tears and determination until they bloomed. To the next generation who will know only the flowers, not the drought that preceded them. We toasted and talked late into the night, residents and supporters mingling freely. Jessica's daughter Maria had fallen asleep in Emma's lap, tiny hand resting on the belly containing her future playmate. The scene was everything our childhood had lacked: safety, abundance, unconditional love. Do you think they know? Emma asked quietly as the evening wound down. Our parents in their cells. Do you think they comprehend what we've built from their ashes? I hope so, I answered honestly, not for vengeance, but for justice. They should see that their worldview lost completely and irrevocably. Love won, connection won. Everything they mocked as weakness became strength. We'd received no communication from them since that final prison visit. Their lawyers occasionally forwarded requests for money or contact, all refused. They were footnotes, now cautionary tales in a story that had transcended them. As guests departed with hugs and promises, Amy and I walked through the quiet house. Tomorrow, it would buzz with activity therapy sessions, children playing women, planning futures previously unimaginable. But tonight, it rested, gathering strength for another day of healing work. "No ghosts," Amy observed. "I thought we'd feel them, but there's only peace." She was right. We'd exorcised the demon so thoroughly that only blessing remained. Every room radiated the intention we'd poured into its transformation. The house that had nearly killed us now gave life to others. Emma and David prepared to leave Emma moving carefully with her precious cargo. "Same time next week," she asked. We maintained regular dinners, chosen routine, replacing enforced performance. "Wouldn't miss it," I confirmed. "Tell the little one Aunt Opal says hello." "She's already responding to voices," Emma shared. "Especially yours. I think she knows you're the reason she gets to exist safely." They left for their own home, a cheerful bungalow with a garden where Emma grew vegetables she trusted. David would cook dinner while Emma rested, their partnership built on mutual care rather than power dynamics. Their daughter would enter a world where such balance seemed normal. Amy and I stood on the porch watching their taillights disappear. The summer evening was perfect crickets singing the soundtrack of peace. Somewhere behind concrete walls, our parents lived in cages of their own making. But here in the house, they'd filled with pain, freedom flourished. "Ready to go home?" Amy asked. I looked back at the Chen house lights glowing warmly in windows that had once been darkened by secrets. This is home too, I realized. Everywhere we've planted healing is home. We drove to our apartment in comfortable silence, hands linked over the center console. Tomorrow would bring challenges, running businesses, supporting survivors, raising children who'd never know the trauma that shaped their parents. But tonight was for gratitude. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma, babies kicking up a storm. I told her the story of brave Aunt Opal who asked dangerous questions. She seems to approve. "Love you." I smiled, texting back, "Love you too. Tell her the most dangerous question led to the most beautiful answer. We found each other." 5 years ago, I'd asked why Emma got steak while I got scraps. That question had shattered more than my finger. It had broken the silence that enabled our abuse. From that breaking had come rebuilding, reimagining, redeeming everything our parents had corrupted. Now we fed hope to the hopeless shelter, to the homeless family, to the abandoned. We'd taken our parents' cruelty and metabolized it into kindness, proving that trauma could be transformed rather than transmitted. The cycle hadn't just broken, it had reversed, creating healing that rippled outward in waves. The full circle was complete, but the spiral continued upward. Each life saved at the Chen house, each fair wage paid at Chen Hardware, each child born into safety, rather than fear, added another ring to our grandmother's legacy. We were no longer just Margaret Chen's granddaughters, but her spiritual heirs building the world she'd envisioned. "Thank you," I whispered to her memory as we pulled into our building, "for hiding your love until it could bloom, for trusting us to find it, for believing we were worth saving even when we couldn't believe it ourselves." A warm breeze carried the scent of jasmine from someone's window box. Emma would say it was grandmother's response, love persisting beyond death through the lives transformed in her name. I chose to believe it, adding my own prayer for continued strength, wisdom, and grace. Tomorrow, more survivors would find their way to the Chen house. More employees would build better lives through ethical business practices. More children would grow up seeing strength modeled as compassion rather than domination. The work would never be finished, but that was its beauty. Healing had no endpoint, only endless opportunities to expand. We'd fed our parents exactly what they'd served us, just desserts seasoned with poetic justice. But more importantly, we'd fed ourselves and others a feast of possibility, proving that those who'd been starved could learn not just to eat, but to nourish others abundantly. The Morrison family tragedy had become the Chen family triumph. Love had won so completely that winning itself had been redefined. Success meant not defeating enemies, but healing wounds. Power meant not controlling others, but empowering them. Family meant not blood or obligation, but choice and commitment. As I drifted towards sleep in Amy's arms, safe in our bed, in our home, in our life built on truth rather than lies, I felt profound peace. The girl who'd survived on scraps had learned to create banquets. The woman who'd asked dangerous questions had found life-changing answers. The sister who'd been separated had been united stronger than ever. The full circle was complete. But the story was just beginning, each chapter more beautiful than the last, each page proof that love multiplies when shared freely. Our parents had taught us that trash gets scraps. We'd proven that with enough love, scraps could become feast, trash could become treasure, and broken girls could become whole women who broke cycles and built futures. And that was the ultimate revenge, not just surviving, but thriving so radiantly that darkness itself was transformed to light. We'd fed them exactly what they'd served, but seasoned with something they'd never tasted: the triumph of hope over horror, forever and always. Do you believe that family cycles of abuse can be broken? Have you witnessed or experienced the transformation of pain into purpose? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe to hear more narratives of triumph over trauma. Share this with anyone who needs to know that healing is possible, that they're not alone, and that their story can have a beautiful ending too. Thank you for joining Opal and Emma on their journey from victims to victors. Remember, you deserve love, safety, and abundance. Your worth is inherent, not earned. And no matter what you've survived, you have the power to transform your scars into stars that light the way for others. Until next time, may you feed your dreams and starve your fears. May you find your chosen family and build your own definition of home. And may you always remember that the best revenge is a life well lived, surrounded by love that multiplies rather than divides. With hope and healing, Opal Chen.